All right. Well, we are live, everybody, and we are starting off CoCo TALK number 7. That's this many. And CoCo TALK number 7 is going to be talking about stuff for beginners, or let's just even, I don't want to put a label in there, but let's just say this is the non-technical talk. We're going to try to make it the non-technical talk. So the discussion came up on Facebook. I think it was Curtis who first mentioned this, that why don't we do one that's not so technical, and because maybe some people are watching this and maybe are possibly intimidated by what's being discussed if they don't know what we're talking about or what those guys are talking about, because for the most part I don't know what they're talking about either, so that's okay. So our purpose here is to talk about basically if you're new to the color computer, or you're just not that savvy or not that technical, and you want to have some questions, simple questions, basic questions. It doesn't matter how small the question is, doesn't matter how easy the topic is. We'll be happy to talk to you about whatever you want to talk about for the color computer. And that is kind of where we're going to, that's what the show is about. And so who do we have with us in the call today? From Australia again, we have Nick Marentes. Good eye, Nick.
Good eye, everyone.
Curtis Boyle is with us from Canada, as well as Bill Noble, and actually the three people up top are all foreigners, right? We've got the Australians and the Canadians.
We're the best.
and the Americans are on the bottom of the screen, and the foreigners are on the top of the screen. So there you go. So so then we have Bill Noble and Bruce Moore. Welcome. And then we have Mark Overholser with us again, David Ladd, and Grant Leighty. Leighty or Leighty? I'm going to screw this one up.
Leighty.
Leighty. You know what? And you know what's cool about that is my daughter's middle name is spelled Lee that way too. Leighh. Lee.
That's cool.
Lee. And David Ladd is here. And hello to everybody who's watching, although it might just be us watching ourselves right now. I'm not sure if there's any legitimate viewers at the moment in the live stream. So, who wants to start things off? Does anybody here have a basic question? And when I say basic, not necessarily the language, but it could be the language too. Anything you guys want to talk about? Where do you want to kick this show off?
The first thing I wanted to mention is you should plug your basic programming tutorials you're doing on YouTube.
Okay.
Because that's right along this topic line. So.
Okay. Yeah, I'm doing basic tutorials on YouTube. And that is me going through the language. BASIC is the programming language that was very popular in the 80s. I think it started before then, right? So BASIC is what most home computers came with in the 80s. When you turned on the machine, you were at a prompt, you were in a programming language, and you had to literally tell your computer what to do. And the cool thing about BASIC for me was learning it on the CoCo was that nice big thick book that it came with that was very cartoony, very simple to read. It was broken down step by step. There we go. There's Bruce showing it on the back of his shirt there. Yeah, and there's Mark holding up one of his copies, right? So BASIC on the CoCo was very easy to learn, in kind of a step-by-step process. And it introduced me to programming and computers and stuff. And I think most people who owned a computer in the 80s probably say, if it wasn't for that machine, I might not be doing what I do today, whatever that is. For those of us who are in the technical arena, if you're in IT or if you're a programmer or a software engineer or whatever that might be, you're probably saying, well, if it wasn't for computer A, B, or C, for my Apple, my Atari, my Commodore, then I might not be doing what I do today. Michael Brandt is here. Hey, Michael. Michael, if you want to join us in the Skype call as well, try to call us on Skype if you want to actually talk and not just chat. So I'm doing a series in BASIC, and I'm trying to reteach myself the language, and the goal is when we're done, and we're close to being done now, is to make a game, because that's what I used to do when I was a kid. For me, the CoCo was never meant to be a serious machine. I bought it to play games, and I made games. So I'm either playing games or making games. That's all I did for the 6 years I had my CoCo. And what do I do now with my CoCo? I play games with my CoCo, right? Am I going to try to do anything serious with my CoCo? Am I going to try to turn my lights on and off? No. Am I going to try to run an operating system? No. Am I going to play games? Hell yeah, right? And so my interest in computers has always been recreational. I've used them as a way to entertain myself. So Richard is here. If anybody wants to call on Skype. Let me see if I have you coming up on my screen. I need you guys to just try to call me on Skype, and I'll see if I can add you to the call if you want. Richard's here. Michael's at work. He can't. Oh, so Richard, you're saying you're at work too? That's fine. So I probably spent way too long saying what Curtis just asked me to say. But yeah, there's a series there. So if you want to learn that, you can watch that and you can learn it. And boom. All right, done.
And just to mention too, I mean, I'm talking to other computer users from the 8-bit era too. The first generation of the CoCo manuals, the big wide ones for the CoCo Basic and then Extended Basic, are almost universally acclaimed as being the best and the easiest to learn from all of the 8-bits.
Yeah.
So it's a nice computer to pick up to try to learn, basic programming on.
It's ironic that the machine that we ended up using had one of the best basics, supposedly from what I hear from you guys, one of the best processors for the 8-bit processor, the 6809. I don't know anything about assembly yet, but unanimously everybody says that CPU is a joy to program for as far as assembly goes. So we got one of the best CPUs and one of the best basics. What was cool for me was transitioning from a CoCo to MS-DOS was a very short curve. Like when DOS came out and then the IBM PCs and compatibles came out, people were taking classes on how to use DOS just to learn how to load software into their computer, Basic was Microsoft Basic, and our disk commands were made by Microsoft, so being able to use the directory command to list the floppy and stuff like that. I didn't have to learn a lot to learn how to use DOS and learn how to use a PC and even how to program a PC, because Microsoft Basic on the PC was, again, a very short curve to transition to. So I kind of lucked out that my starter machine was a very easy stepping stone to the big leagues,
Yeah. And ironically, the CoCo disk controller, by total accident, is actually able to read, IBM PC disks from that era as well. If with the right software, the controller is totally compatible.
Very cool. Was that technical, by the way, what you just said there?
Say the word.
Now, reading disks is pretty basic, I think. Technical be if I explain how it works.
Yeah, right. One of the questions.
Go ahead.
Go ahead. I was going to say one of the questions that came up on the mailing list too that maybe we can address. We run out of things to talk about. Was if you were to buy a CoCo, or if you were to have only one CoCo, what would be either your favorite CoCo or what's the best CoCo to have? So maybe when we get around to it, we can talk about the difference in the machines and what different machines, what software can and cannot run on different machines. And if you don't own a CoCo and you had to buy just one, what should you look for? So maybe we can talk about that at some point in time. Maybe talk about different emulators if you want to use an emulator to play CoCo stuff. Things like that.
Yeah, because when we're saying beginner questions, we're not referring just to programming here. It might just be, like what hardware is compatible with what version of the CoCo. Like if I want to buy CoCo STC, for example, does that work with them all? It can be anything on hardware, like how do you plug in an ORC90 pack, or what's a multi-pack for, or whatever. It doesn't have to be programming related. It can be anything.
Well, I've got a good beginner tip. Make sure you power off before you plug anything into the
yes.
Yes.
Yeah. The terms plug and play and hot swappable do not apply to 8-bit technology, right?
Yeah, except for maybe the joysticks.
Right. Turn off your color computer. Make sure it's turned off before you insert any cartridges. Good tip.
Yeah.
Another good tip, too, is make sure you always save what you're working on. Because when the computer will never ask you, would you like to save this before closing? It just won't do that. I even have to, like when I'm working on my basic series now in VCC is technically it's a Windows app, but when I click on the X to close it, it's not like Microsoft Word that's going to say, would you like to save this file? If I close VCC and I hadn't saved my program I'm working on, I lost my program. So you got to remember to save and save often. That was the rule back then.
Auto save was not there.
Yeah. It's just emulate original hardware because you turn the power off when you're,
That's exactly it. Exactly it. Yeah. So the CoCo did not, when you went, like even now in Windows, when you go to shut down Windows, if you have files open, it'll sometimes prompt you to close the files that are open before it shuts down the machine. Old hardware didn't do that. You turned it off, boom, it was gone. You lost power, boom, you were gone. So
the the same thing happens with a modern computer. If you turn the power off, it also just turns off.
Yeah, if you lose power, yeah. There's not much we can do against that.
Yeah. I mean, some of the later CoCo programs, like some word processing stuff, actually would, if you were to hit the quit command but you hadn't saved your buffer, it would prompt you. But that whole autosave thing didn't really come out for years after the original CoCo came out. So.
Well, that became a programming skill to remember to save somehow.
Yeah.
Very painful learned one, I think.
Especially if you're Rick Adams and your power supply is failing, because
Oh my God.
it was mission critical for him.
So who out there watching right now has a question for us or a comment or anything else you'd like to know
If you look
about
in
stuff?
Skype chat, there is somebody asking a question. He says he has a basic ASM question.
Okay.
It was me, Bruce.
Oh, that was you? Okay. It just says live CoCo, so I couldn't be sure who that
Okay.
was.
Okay, yeah. Oh, whatever, yeah.
And this didn't have to be about basic. It could be about any beginner question on whatever sub-platform of CoCo. So go ahead.
Oh, well, of course, I'm trying to get my Forest of Doom game done, and I want to put a little bit of machine code in there. It's been a really long time since I've done that, and it's like, wait, no, how do I make this position independent, and how do I get it out of there once I've assembled it? Because I guess what I've done in the previous times, I would, I guess, what is it? The clear command. You clear some space, and you set the
the
whatever
boundary.
it is. So it loads. Yeah, the boundary. You set beyond that. But of course, I was doing that on a 16K cassette, I think, at the time, and so I don't know. I'd rather have something where I can just put it wherever I want and not have to worry about whether it's going to load on a disk system or not. I just find that all kind of confusing right now.
Okay, Nick's probably one of the best ones to answer that, since he does the most RS-DOS assembly programming. So, did you want to touch on that, Nick?
Well, if you want to just make it position independent, just have to avoid jump commands in the code. Everything else is relative anyway,
Okay.
and don't do any direct accesses to the code itself. Then it becomes just position independent. It's not too hard.
Would you avoid the org command? Is that thing?
I think if you could say org 0, and then when you load it, I think you can do a load comma and offset.
Yeah.
Yeah. So then you tell it where to load. Yeah.
Yeah, and then if you have a 16K machine versus a 32K machine, you can just check with the basic a little call or something, or just to check to see how much RAM you actually have, and then you can actually offset load it for the top of 16K or the top of 32K. You still have to do your little clear trick, but
Right. But that changes if I'm using disk basic though, right? Doesn't that move it or something, or grab some space, or?
Disk basic will shove stuff at the bottom of memory up, because it allocates some room for disk buffers right after the text screen. I'm getting a little technical, sorry. But basically, most of the time you're loading the machine language programs. Yeah. Most of the time when you're loading a machine language program to run from basic, you're loading at the top of memory. So that part doesn't move unless you've increased the amount of RAM in the machine. So 16K, it's at the 16K line. 32K, it's at the 32K line. So if you're doing it for 32K regardless, and you don't have to worry about cassette or disk, because it'll always load up at the top of the 32K space.
So, right. So I think that explains the problems I've had, because I think I basically gobbled up all the memory, so it would work on a cassette, and then but I'd try and go and get it onto a disk. Of course, it gobbled up some of the space, and and then setting that boundary would have not worked anymore. Probably that's what happened.
Is this program for a CoCo 1 and 2 or CoCo 3?
Well, I'd love it to stay compatible with a CoCo 2, if I can manage. I'll have to do some testing, I guess, and see. But I'm not using any CoCo 3 graphics or anything. So, yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Now, if you put it up at the high part, do you know if it's going to require 16 or 32K RAM, or is it variable, or?
Do I know how big the program is?
Yeah.
or
how big it's going to be when it's done?
I not yet. I don't know.
Yeah, because if it's 32K required, then you can just use, depending how big your routine is, you can just clear whatever string space you need, comma, ampersand H, 7F00 or whatever, reserve the top 256 bytes, or however much big your routine is, and that'll work on cassette or disc. It won't matter.
Okay.
The one thing you would have to worry about is if you're pushing your 32K to the limit with your basic program, then it might say fit on a cassette system, which gives you a bit more RAM than a disk system does, because disk reserves some space for buffers and stuff.
Yeah, see, I've got a couple of old games which I've not been able to get to run on the CoCo 3 because of this, and so I got to get in there and tinker with them and patch them somehow. So I got to look at that, I guess.
I'm sure like Bill or Nick or myself could help you with that.
Awesome.
Yeah, that's what's great about having our little community, is that if anybody has a question, it could be a technical question, it could be a simple question, you post it out there, chances are somebody's going to know the answer to that, either in the Facebook group or in the mailing list or both. So there's no shortage of knowledge and skills and experience, and everybody's willing to share it, which is always great. It's very cool stuff. Cool things have happened from that, like the fact that we're looking at bomb threat right now. Bomb threat in the making.
Yeah.
And the lost game is very cool. I'm going to switch my screen over to a second to show something full screen, because this is a question I've been asked before, and that question is if I want to hook up a color computer to a modern TV, what do I use? Now, this is the standard cable that came with the color computer. It's called an RF cable, and it's basically like a coax cable. This connection here is called an RCA cable. What we used to have back in the day was this would plug into a little switch box that we would switch between TV or game, and you turn your television to channel 3 or 4. What you can get now is a very simple adapter that you plug into your modern televisions. This is a coax connection, because all of our TVs now have a coax input. That box was designed for rabbit ears. You had to screw them onto the antenna leads. So this is what's called a coax F connector. F is in Foxtrot. And so on the one side, it has what screws onto your TV, and on the other side, it has the female input of this RCA cable. And so you would just basically screw this onto your television. You would plug this RF cable here into this guy here, which I'm having a hard time doing right now. You would plug him in, and then you would plug the other end to your CoCo, and you switch your CoCo to channel 3 or 4, you switch your TV to channel 3 or 4, and then boom, you can watch your CoCo on a modern TV. So what most people see, because when you see CoCos on eBay, a lot of people say, well, I can't test this, or I couldn't verify if this is working, because that little input on the back of the CoCo, which I'll just grab one here. All right, so, I mean, here's the back of a color computer. This input right here, which this looks like what should be what we call a composite input, right? Because it's the same type of cable. And with composite, you had one that was yellow for your video, you had red and white for your stereo. So this looks like a composite, but it's not. It's actually what's called RF, radio frequency, and it's actually outputting audio and video over one cable, and that got converted back to your television. So this little adapter here, this is called a coax F connector to RCA adapter. They're very cheap. You screw this into your TV, you use the same cable, and then boom, you can get your CoCo on a modern TV. Just put your TV on channel 3 or channel 4, and this would work for any retro system, any video game console, any old computer, anything that had that RF type cable. So just FYI. Okay, Richard. Okay, Richard, I screwed up your name last time. I'm not going to try to pronounce it this time, but it was, let me see if I can get it right. It was Lorbieski. Richard Lorbieski. I have a question about real-time clocks. Is there hardware available new for real-time clocks so I don't have to enter the date and time on PowerUp in Nitrous 9? I used to have one from Burke & Burke.
Yeah, that was a smartwatch, I think Burke & Burke used.
Yes.
Can't you use a no-slot clock on the CoCo under like a ROM?
Yeah, that's what the smartwatch did. I'm assuming those are still available, right? I haven't
there's
actually.
Actually, a bunch of old stock you can get from China, but the batteries are getting kind of long. There's actually an Apple group that makes a chip that has replaceable batteries for about $40. I can find the link.
Yeah, that should work then, because I mean the smartwatch itself, it had the battery built in, which is one stupid thing about it, because once the battery was dead, this clock didn't work.
Well,
but yeah, basically you just piggybacked a ROM on it.
Right. One thing is they did have an external line, so you could technically tear them open and then, find the power line and put an external battery on it. But yeah, let me find the link for the Apple people that have a new no-slot clock with replaceable battery.
All right, you might need to
They're
paste
weather
it
ones
into
too, so-
Skype first. If you paste it into Skype, I should be able to paste it into YouTube. I don't know if you've got the permissions to paste it to YouTube, but I'll pass it along for you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Nope. Let me find it here.
There used to be other
Um,
clock chips too, but I don't know if any of those are still around either. So
So Burke and Burke, was that just a standalone real-time clock card, or was it built into like a disk controller or multi-purpose card or something?
well, because it piggybacked on a ROM, you could stick it like in anything that had a ROM in it that you were regularly accessing. Some people put it on the floppy disk controller. Burke and Burke sold it, as a bundle with their hard drive controller, with their auto boot ROM. I mean, there's multiple ways you could do it because it just piggybacked on the ROM. You wrote a certain sequence on top of the ROM, and I think it was 64 bits if I remember correctly. If you wrote the certain sequence out, it would say, "Oh, you wanted to access the clock," and then you could set the time or read the time or whatever, and then go back.
Richard says it was built into the Burke and Burke hard drive controller.
The big
But
metal
you-
thing.
Okay.
Probably set underneath the ROM for the disk extended basic.
Isn't that
Actually, I have a Burke and Burke right here. It's part of the card adapter. It's because usually the Burke and Burke for the MFM used adapter, which plugged into the CoCo's multi-pack or your CoCo, and then a old XT 8-bit MFM card would then plug into it. But the RTC is actually part of the Burke and Burke's adapter itself. So the PC's MFM card just had the CoCo's ROM in it.
Yeah, that was the XT ROM, his auto boot ROM that Chris Burke made.
That
Wish
sounds
I
like
had
such an elaborate. It's such an elaborate hack job if you think about it. Because I remember them talking about this in the CoCo Crew podcast in one of the tech segments, that the controller was really just a bus adapter. I just converted the bus CoCo bus to the PC bus. But it sounds like there was some value added stuff to it as well. I mean, it's pretty elaborate. It's a high tech, high tech hackery.
Mainly done for cost, because at the time, the CoCo, up till that time, it was using SASE or SCSI drives, and SASE were like really old and hard to find. SCSI was expensive,
Yeah.
and then once the Burke and Burke came out of that, I mean, the price of a hard drive for a CoCo literally dropped 40% overnight, because you could use just standard PC ones, and you could use MFM or RLL depending which controller from the PC you had.
Mm-hmm. All of
My
which
head's
are
spinning with all the acronyms there.
yeah. Those were different. I remember the abbreviations. I think it was Western Digital or Seagate that made the hard drives, and it was just when you bought the only thing I remember about them was that I think it was the MFM hard drives, which is just an encoding technology. Those were always even numbers, so you had a 20 megabyte or a 40 megabyte MFM. The same physical drive on an RLL controller would be an odd number, so you had like a 30 megabyte or a 60 megabyte. So when you were if you were ever to look at the heads, tracks, sectors, and cylinders on the drives, I think they were physically almost identical drives, but it must have been a different encoding method that allowed them to cram more space into the surface area or something like that.
Yeah, David's actually showing his Burke and Burke. there.
Okay, there's the Burke and Burke. So let me make that big. And so in the center of the screen here, that's the tip. That's the classic battery, like that lithium ion kind of watch battery that was used on PC motherboards too, that would keep the clock information there. So that's the battery for the clock. Where's the actual clock itself?
It's one of those chips that are on the board there.
Next to the battery? One of those
Yeah.
little chips? Yeah.
Is that
That's
yeah, 'cause
impressive.
the way
Is
you
it under
see
the
like
XT ROM chip, David?
I don't know. I probably have to.
Could be the small one next to the battery too. The actual.
Here, let me remove the stupid PC card here. Oh, crap.
Don't break anything.
Well, I
Set
don't
that-
have any working MFM drives anymore anyway,
Yeah,
so it doesn't
set-
quite
yeah.
matter.
Set your phone down
Oh
and
my
use two
goodness
hands.
gracious, that's a jumper nightmare under here, it looks like.
Yeah,
is
that was
really
just
cool.
a generic XT card adapter because Birkenberg actually demonstrated it running with the Logitech ScanMan, scanning pictures and stuff with that same card. You just had have the right drivers.
So what he's showing right now in the center of the screen, that's the actual Birkenberg adapter?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay.
This thing right here, this part right
Right.
there is the Birkenberg.
So the gold...
And from the battery connection...
Yep.
The battery connection from right here goes from right over to here to this via... and then comes over here under this chip. So this must be the RTC right here.
Okay. The real-time clock. And
so technically, since this is probably, I would hope is still available. No, that's not it. That's a 74 LSO4.
It was usually under the ROM chip. So check the XT ROM. If it's got that weird plasticky socket thing under it rather than a regular socket, that's probably it.
Yeah,
Well,
this makes sense because they take less board space.
I know in my Birkenberg, it was actually the XT ROM socket you plugged into the smartwatch, but then plugged into the PC card, where the PC card normally would have its own ROM.
Now I'm trying to rip out the XT ROM right now. No, it's just a
Live. We
standard
get to watch
socket.
David destroy a chip.
No, I got one of these chip pullers right there, so that's not a problem.
Destroy
But
this.
yeah,
Reality-
there's the XT
Reality
ROM.
television here.
Yeah.
What's the fun in
and
that?
there's just a plain socket. So
Just plain socket? Okay.
So it looks like we've got a 74 LS, although it thought that was going from the battery connection. Or maybe that's the ground line. But then we also have 74 LS 0000. Ah, there it is. Dallas.
Dallas Semiconductor, right? Yep.
That's it.
That's it.
DS 1215. So technically someone that had some decent skills for dealing with PCBs probably could make a card that could still reuse that chipset on the CoCo.
Yeah, they're actually available. I posted a link to an eBay auction. You can get them from China for $10 or so.
All right, let me find that link and I'll put it in the...
Yeah, that's new old stock stuff. But if the ones have the integrated battery, then you're going to be in trouble. I'm looking for this new board though.
Okay, I'm sure.
Yeah, that'd be interesting to have.
Okay, I'm going to paste that in there.
Okay. Yep.
New old
Kirby,
stock. Okay. Hello, Jakers33.
Now to try to get this thing back together.
Okay, that's pretty cool. So
As
as
a real-time
far
clock, I should just mention, like the question was originally about running it under OS 9, but if I remember correctly, ADOS also supports the smartwatch, so even under BASIC, you can actually access the real-time clock.
so there's no like all-in-one board right now that has that built in. It's not built into the CoCo SDC or anything else like that.
Super
No, but
IDE
that's not a bad
has
idea.
one built into it.
It does, okay.
Yeah, at last I knew it did. Actually, I have a Super IDE sitting right here. I could take it apart.
Nah.
Well, crap! Everything's falling.
Please don't break it. Please don't break anything, David. I don't want to be responsible for.
Destroying
So-
history.
We're watching a mad scientist perform brain surgery. So,
See, if you've been catching me after I've been assembling all those experimental boards I've been tinkering with, so
I got another link I'm going to post out here too that Mark's sending us. Hold on one second.
So I'm pretty sure this was released, but there's some pictures of the prototype.
Mark, if you want to post something or just say hi inside the YouTube chat, I'll give you moderator privileges so you can post directly to chat.
Okay.
You can post it directly to YouTube. So just say like hi or something like that.
Okay. Let me pull up a YouTube window.
Or if it's too
Super
much trouble,
IDE.
if you don't want to do that, you can continue to do it through Skype and I'll proxy it for you. But
No
if you don't mind, we'll go ahead and do that. So there's your Super IDE controller.
yep, and it has a battery.
There's the battery.
And what is it's also a Dallas chip, I think, DS
Yep, should be.
1315. So I think it's the same one that was in the Birkenberg, yes?
I'm alive.
It was a
Mark
common one.
says. Okay. Okay, I've just made
1215 is
just
what
made
was
you a
in the
moderator,
version.
Mark, so you can post directly to YouTube now if you'd like.
No problem. Thanks.
Mm-hmm.
But I think David has a good idea. Somebody should maybe the next version of the SDC or something should have the built-in
Real-time
ability
clock.
to handle that too. Yeah,
There's
That
it's
and
not a very
music
expensive chip.
No.
That and John Linville's
No, and
music.
as you can see, this is like the Burke and Burke used the 1215, and the Super IDE uses the 1315, and they're both socketed chips. So, I wouldn't think it would be that hard. But then again, I'm just starting with hardware design myself, so. Yeah.
For the average Joe Blogs, though, what's the purpose of a real-time clock?
Well, under ADOS, I think if I remember correctly, you can correct me if I'm wrong, Nick, because I haven't used ADOS in a while, but I think it actually, when you save programs, it would actually save the date and time you made them, so you could actually tell, if I'm looking at two backups, which is the recent one.
Okay.
And
then
under
s-
OS 9 made it so you didn't have to keep entering the
Yeah.
date and time at the start of OS 9's boot.
Right, but again, was it used though? Was there a timestamp put into the file system as well? Or
Oh,
the
no,
file
it's
name?
built
Yes.
into OS 9. Everything's timestamped.
Okay, so it is timestamped because if without any application of that information, it's kind of pointless. So yeah, if it's being used,
Under
then
RS-DOS, it wasn't that useful until ADOS came out with it. I can't remember if it was regular ADOS 3 or extended ADOS, but one of the two actually had it, and you actually could keep track. Like, it would have been nice with Rick's backups because he had to keep writing on labels, and scribble out the old date, put the new one when he made
Yeah.
new backups.
Yeah,
Whereas, this way you could just load this, did a dir, okay, that was created on June 4th.
yeah. That's the things we take for granted. The fact that the date and time is built into our computers now, and that all our files are timestamped already. Hold on one second.
Come on, Super IDE, go back together.
So, Nick, you never used the clock in ADOS?
No. Well, I didn't have a real-time clock anyway. But,
Okay, but you had ADOS 3 or extended ADOS 3 or something?
back then I used to, yeah.
Okay.
But I never used the clock, no.
Okay.
The things we
I
take
know,
for granted.
It was essential under OS 9 because it was such a pain in the butt to have to type it in every time you rebooted.
Yeah. I don't know how many people are using ADOS nowadays. May
Yeah,
not
I think
be-
people switch to like CoCo SDC or HDB
Yeah.
DOS, some of them support hard drive images and stuff. So maybe nice if one. I think doesn't HDB DOS support a clock too? Can't remember.
That I do not know.
I'm not sure. It's a good question.
I don't think so.
But it'd be nice if the CoCo SDC had that built in because it's a small chip and it's dead easy to program for. So.
Mm-hmm.
And ADOS actually added basic commands. You could actually get the actual time and stuff in basic. You didn't have to write native machine language crap. It was just like a command that you ran, if I remember correctly.
After watching David taking his hardware apart, I thought it would be really, like, maybe as a beginner's how to get into your computer and how to pop in an extended basic ROM or something would be a neat segment. I would be interested in seeing that.
Yeah.
I think thinking of doing that on one of yours, aren't you?
What's that?
You were thinking of doing a video of inserting extended basic because you transferred one to your TDP, didn't you?
Yeah. It actually wasn't that hard. I need to get an actual. I used to have a chip puller, a socket puller. I don't have one of those anymore. I'd like to get one because I'm always a little nervous when I use a flathead screwdriver to kind of jimmy the chips up. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, I discovered it completely by just kind of guessing when I had that one chip I pulled out and I saw there was an empty socket there, and I looked at the other computer that had the two, and they're kind of numbered that way. It was pretty easy to figure out which one was which. But yeah, it's neat because again, like I say, when I used my CoCo back then, it was all for fun. I didn't understand hardware back then at all. Hardware was a complete mystery. And I understand hardware now the way any modern PC person has. When your graphics card goes bad, you put in a new graphics card. That's the component. So, soldering irons have not been a thing I've used. So I've not had to replace chips or, solder things or put sockets on circuit boards or anything like that. So that's a different, it's a different skill set. It's a different way, but it's definitely a lot more hands-on. So it's definitely interesting. Richard's back. So that would be kind of interesting. We have some people who are definitely have a lot more expertise in that area, but I don't mind sharing the little things I learned along the way. I was actually thinking about ordering a few from Ed Snyder because he mentioned he had created a generic ROM chip replacement, and I guess it plugs into the original socket and has a piggyback thing that uses a slightly larger chip because that was a more easily available
common,
chip.
yeah, the 28 versus the 24.
Yeah, so I think he says he's got a few left. So I was actually thinking about ordering a few of those. So that if I ever run into more CoCos that don't have extended basic, I can just do the $10 upgrade and be able to sell somebody a more capable CoCo if I come across more in the future.
Yeah, might be a good idea to show some of the more common RAM upgrades too. Like if somebody buys a CoCo 1 on eBay 16K, if it happens to be an F board, you can show them how to upgrade to 64K because it's basically just unplug 8 chips, put 8 new ones in, move a couple of jumpers, it's done. There's no soldering, there's no nothing.
Oh yeah.
CoCo 3 upgrade, how to do a 512K, you got to snip a capacitor or two and just unplug 4 chips and plug a board in. Like for some people that have just gotten them off eBay and have never had a CoCo before, even that, breaking the warranty sticker, even though there's no Radio Shack anymore really to do it, would scare people. And if you show them how easy it is, like there's nothing really hard electronically here. It's just if you can operate a screwdriver, basically you're set. So that would be a nice series to do. The simple upgrades.
Yeah, no doubt. Let's talk about that for a minute. Just eBay and what to look for, what to buy, what to be concerned with. So, I and some of the people are in this call right now. Matter of fact, 2 of them are. I acquired, let's just say, a handful of CoCos over time, and then I got to the point where let me liquidate some of these and kind of put them back into the community for people who don't have them or need one. And I learned a lot along the way. I learned the eBay buying process. Like the first time I bid on a color computer, I was a complete noob to eBay. I didn't realize, I'm like, oh my God, I better jump on this. And so I ended up bidding on like 3 different machines, not knowing if I would get any of them. I was so worried about not getting one. And I ended up winning all 3 freaking bids at once. So the first time I bought a CoCo, I bought 3 CoCos. And so
that's when the addiction started.
Yeah. And the rest, as we say, is history. Most of the time when you see one on eBay, it's going to say untested. When you buy it, you're obviously buying whatever you buy as is. And if you're buying a 35-year-old machine, you don't know what to expect. If you're lucky, they will say that it's tested, and maybe they'll put up a picture of the color computer on a TV or a monitor so you can see that's working. You don't always have that option. So there's definitely a reason to be concerned when you're buying from somebody who doesn't know if it's good. But luckily, most of these machines, they're pretty rugged. They were built well. They're simple enough. They're sturdy enough that they've stood the test of time. You've definitely got about a 95% chance of buying something and having it work. And like you were mentioning before, Curtis, it's somewhat easy to fix too. One of the computers I sold had the screen output was black and white, and so the one thing I'm trying to do is if I'm going to sell something, at least I'm going to say, well, here I've tested it, and here are all the specs. Here's how much memory it has. Here's what version of BASIC it has. A little bit more detail for somebody who wants to know exactly what they're getting. But I posted that picture in the Facebook group, and somebody else said, well, if you open up the RF modulator box and then there's a little thing you can turn, you can actually adjust that, and it was probably an easy fix. Now, the guy who bought it from me says, I know how to fix it anyways, but I wanted to make sure I was disclosing whatever I was selling, because when I bought it, I didn't know what I was getting, but even then, with this community and with the knowledge that's out there, if you post a picture of a problem, somebody probably knows a solution and can steer you through that. One of the things that came up last week when I sent out those pictures, I was mentioning my keyboard didn't work. I think John Linville was the first guy that said it might be the PIA chip. What is that? Programmable Interrupt. What's the A stand for?
Programmable Interface Adapter.
Programmable Interface Adapter. So that's a particular chip. And then I think somebody else even said, well, try to take the chip out and just stick it back in too. So sometimes that's the weird thing about computers. It's not really broken. You just need to pop it out and pop it back in, and poof, it works. So. Yeah, that was you, Richard. Yeah, so that was the CoCo 1 I sold you. Did you get that, by the way, Richard? And so, yeah, there are certain things that even if you get a CoCo that might not be exactly right, it might be easy to fix. If again, it's easy as a relative term, depending on what you know. For me, I could say if it involves a soldering iron, it's not an easy fix for me right now. But that's a skill I hope to improve over time. But CoCo 2s are pretty common on eBay, and they definitely average for like $50. And then depending if sometimes you have to pay for shipping, sometimes you have buy it now and fast and free shipping. It depends on who's selling it, but CoCo 2s are definitely still pretty common to come by if you're looking to get into the real hardware hobby. That might be a good place to start, and a fairly inexpensive place to start. Okay, Richard says he hasn't got it yet. Postman came by too early. You have to wait till Monday. Sorry about that, Richard.
Yeah, I just want to mention one other trick. If people are trying to determine if a CoCo is working and you don't have a TV or anything to hook it up to, and this works on all three models, if you you turn it on, you can usually hear the cassette relay click in. But if you type in motor on, blindly hit return or enter, and then motor off, if you can hear the relay clicking on and off, then that means BASIC's running, the keyboard's working, and all that kind of thing. And you can do that without hooking it up to anything except power. So that's a little tip if you want to see if the machine's basically working. And
so it's motor space on, so MOTOR space ON, enter, right? And that was
motor off to shut it back off again.
Okay, so those were commands.
And you'll hear this audible click from inside the machine. You'll hear the click of the relay.
That is like the trick I always try to tell people now on a modern computer. How can you tell if your computer's frozen or not? Easiest thing to do on that is you just hit numlock, right? And if you click on numlock and it lights up, then there is brainwave activity in your computer. If you're hitting numlock and it doesn't light up, then it's not working. So this is kind of an old school version of that, right? So if you can make a clicky sound on it, then it's then the computer's alive. That's kind of good.
The nice thing about that, though, is that works on the CoCo 1, the 2, the 3, the TDP. I don't know if it works in MC10 or not, but it's universal across them all.
That's a good tip to know. I'm going to actually type that into the chat just so it's documented, because I have been making transcripts of these. Okay, so to test a CoCo without TV, use motor on and motor off, followed by... That's actually a good tip.
Yeah.
One thing I think that would probably help too for, especially like me, I'm just now getting back into the CoCo after 20 plus years, maybe longer. But what was the difference between like a CoCo 1 and a CoCo 2 and a CoCo 3 and standard, basic, and extended basic? And of course, we already know what the difference between 4K and 16 and 64K is, but mainly just what's the difference between all the different computers? So if I find one with one catalog number, whether it's a CoCo 2 64K, then maybe I'll find another one that has a different number, which version B. So what's the difference from the version A and the version B in the catalog number for the CoCo 2 64K, for example?
Who wants to take on that one?
I can answer some of the questions. I can't specifically answer the A and B questions, though.
I mean, I don't know where to start. I guess CoCo 1 and CoCo 2, obviously the CoCo 1 had the longer case. It started gray with the chiclet keyboard, and there was multiple versions of that board, which made it easier and easier to upgrade to 64K. I think the earliest one Radio Shack released that I've actually seen is a D board, and it's a real pain to upgrade to 64K. You have to cut circuit traces and all kinds of stuff. The E board became a bit easier, and then the F board was basically just put chips in and move jumpers. It was pretty simple. The CoCo 2, for the most part, has a better keyboard, shorter case. They started not socketing all the chips. Basically, it was a cheaper version of the CoCo 1 for the most part. There's some others like the salt chip and a few other things have changed too, but that's a more minor detail. The last runs of the CoCo 2 were the CoCo 2B. That has the new VDG that is capable of doing inverse video, lowercase, true lowercase. You can tell that, one, by doing a few pokes, but also, if I remember correctly, the 0 character on the T1 VDG has a slash through it, and the older VDGs do not. So just by turning it on, you can actually kind of tell if you've got the new chip or not.
Alexander Wallace just joined us. Sorry about that.
Okay. Oh, good. The CoCo 3, basically, that's a whole new machine. I mean, it runs at double speed. It has new graphics modes, new text modes, the gimme greater than 64K with an MMU adapter, a whole new interrupt system for the semi-language programmers. It's a whole new generation of machine. It's like jumping from an 8088 to an 8286, basically.
No video artifacting.
There is, just not on composite, not on RGB. It also has multiple. Thanks for pointing that out, Mark. It has multiple monitor outputs too. The CoCo 1 and 2 by default just came with the RF modulator that Steve showed the adapter for earlier. There were some models you could get for education back in the day that actually would have the composite mod for schools. And then the CoCo 3 came out. It has composite, it has RF, and it has RGB for the RGB analog. So it's got all three outputs.
Cool. And then what's the difference between standard basic and extended basic? What was the big difference between those two?
8K and 16.
Yeah, the color ROM is 8K. The extended basic ROM is 16K, exactly as Mark said. The 16K ROM, or some in the older machines, it was actually two separate 8K ROMs that you plugged in separate. But basically, it added all the high-res graphics commands. It added the play command, renumbering command. A bunch of commands got added, mostly to support the high-res graphics.
Hexadecimal numbers.
And watch Stevie's series there because he's going through a lot of that right now.
Yeah, yeah. And so, when I first started with my CoCo, I had a silver CoCo 1 with, I call it standard basic, what we now call color basic. And it was confusing to me was that I could run a machine language game that could do high resolution graphics. So the computer was able to do high resolution graphics, but you didn't have any commands in basic to do it in the basic language to take care of high resolution graphics. So it was basically a way to extort more money from the consumer. And this actually started, I think, in the TRS-80, right? There was a level 1 and a level 2 basic on the TRS-80 model 1 and 3, and the level 2 basic was a more capable version of basic they could charge more money for. So I think extended basic was available from the beginning on the first CoCo.
Not quite.
Not quite? Okay,
it was a few months delayed. And to be honest, it wasn't totally extortion. The reason that, and this applied to the Model 1 too, the reason it was actually kept as separate is because if you had a 4K CoCo, you could not run some of those graphics modes.
True, because it would take up more memory. Yeah.
Yeah, and that was the main reason they kept it separate, because the 4Ks all came with color basic. 16K was optional. You had enough RAM now to do extended basic, but you had to add the extra ROM. Now, yeah, they extorted on price and stuff, but
yeah.
There was a reason for having color basic by itself, because the 4K could not do anything else but.
Right. So it's essentially it gives the programmer, meaning you or I, the ability to do cool things like the circle, line, and paint, and high resolution accessing to the screens, get and put, play for music. So yeah, I mean, it's very cool multimedia enhancements to the language itself.
Yeah,
I assume that extended color basic would have cost Tandy more money as well.
Microsoft licensing.
Yeah, licensing involved, the cost of the ROM chips, which were probably much more expensive back then. So there was the physical production cost, the ROM chip cost, and then I think it added an extra $100 to the price of the machine, retail.
The original machines, yes, because there's a whole separate chip and a separate socket. The CoCo 2, that was one of the things they did to be a bit cheaper, is that I think because CoCo 2s were sold to 16 and 64K only, there wasn't a 4K model. Mm-hmm. They kind of made it so there was one socket with both ROMs on one chip on the later models.
Okay. Gotcha. All right.
You can get them.
All right, and I got another...
Go ahead, Grant.
Yeah, one other thing, too. If I remember correctly, CoCo 3 games do not... some of the CoCo 2 games do not work on the CoCo 3 games. Is that true, if I remember correctly?
Yes. Yeah, there's a couple different reasons. Some of it's the memory mapping stuff. There's some games that, if they used all of 64K, there's that vector page RAM thing, which would sometimes screw them up. Then there's the other part of artifacting colors, as was mentioned. If you had an RGB monitor, as Mark mentioned, you don't get artifacting colors. It comes out purely black and white. Now, technically, the game still works, or the program still works. It just doesn't appear as originally intended. And then the other one is the semi-graphics modes, because the CoCo 3 did not support semi-graphics modes above the basic set reset that Color Basic had. You can't do like 64 by 192 like John Linville's Farfall. Actually, I think he used a slightly lower one, but that type of mode doesn't work. Now, Nick and a few others have actually found there's some pokes you can do to kind of fake it, but it doesn't totally do it right, because any text you do on there just disappears. So that's one compatibility problem. So some of the old games like Protectors 2 or Storm or newer ones like Firefall will not run properly on a CoCo 3. Well, it's a little bit of hacking, and even then they don't perfectly run like they used to.
Okay, cool. And then I have another question here. I'm trying to rattle these off because I just got my CoCo 2 here, actually today, just about an hour before the call.
Keep going then. Keep going.
So pretty much now we do not use floppy drives or tape drives anymore. We mainly download the ROMs and the game stuff from the internet. So for one, here there's a SD card converter we can buy now.
Mm-hmm.
There's a couple
CoCo
of them.
SDC.
So what's the difference between what's the difference between the two of them? Because I think there's two different ones out there.
Yeah, if you're talking the Flash ROM one, that one is meant more to emulate just cartridges. So it's kind of designed to map in on the same part where the cartridge normally would have been. You just tell it which one you want to map in for that particular session you're having. If you want to play Project Nebula, if you want to play Double Back, you can switch between. The CoCo SDC actually is a more generic one. It replaces the disk controller and also fakes being a hard drive controller if you set it up right. And that's what Steve's showing, I believe, there, where you just take a standard SD card, you plug it in, and you can put in, hundreds and hundreds or thousands of disk images and even hard drive images, and then you can basically run your entire software library just from that thing. And then you can copy stuff to it from a PC or a Mac or whatever as you go through. So that's probably the best upgrade.
Mark's got the clear one.
Ooh, fancy.
Mark's got the clear one. The original, was that plexiglass?
Yeah, it's the Tim Linder one.
Yeah, neat.
I'm going to call that the iSDC because of Apple always had those transparent iMacs back in the day.
I stuff, so. Yeah, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Probably the more user-friendly one, Grant, would probably be the CoCo SDC because it looks and acts just the way Disk Extended Color Basic acted in a CoCo. Uses the same commands, dir to list the directory. It's kind of like a DOS on top of DOS because there's the SDC DOS that you use to browse the contents of the SD card itself. You then mount one of those disk images, and it looks like and then it becomes a virtual floppy to the color computer. Then you manage it like a normal floppy on the CoCo. You would type in dir to list what's on there, and you would do a load for basic or load M for assembly, and you would manage the files on the disk just like it was a physical floppy. So I am not as familiar with the Flash, but I think in order to use the Flash, you still have to have a way to get the files from your CoCo to the Flash. So you would still have to have probably like a multi-pack interface and something else to copy those to the Flash itself. But once you get the things on the Flash, I know Barry Nelson and his daughter have come up with a menu program where you can actually just run through like a text-based user interface and launch whatever's in that Flash. So it's kind of like a reprogrammable multi-cart where you can load up lots of images into one physical cartridge. Because it's now with flash storage, we've got so much more space than we had back in the 8K or 16K ROM days. What is it? I think you said 512K worth of storage.
Yeah,
or
it
is it more?
supports the MMU unit that the RoboCop and Predator did. The other advantage of CoCo Flash is if you're a developer and you want to make a cartridge, you can actually test it as if it was running from a real cartridge.
Right.
Whereas with the CoCo SDC, you're going to have to kind of fake it out and map it in RAM, and you're not testing it quite properly as would be on real hardware. So for some people that are using some of John Linville's boards, etc., you can now do the actual ROM testing.
Actually, the CoCo SDC does have programmable flash. That's what the dip switches are. You can set which flash bank it is.
Yeah, that's for the auto boot ROM. I think there's 8 banks, if I remember correctly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But how big are they though? Are they 8K banks?
128K.
16.
16? Okay.
I'm pretty sure each bank is 16.
Yeah, it would map in basically what an extended disk controller could do, like the old J&M DOS, was just 16K. Whereas CoCo Flash, the Flash thing, actually, you've got lots way beyond that. I mean, you can put the entire CoCo library on there easily with room left over. So,
right.
I think Jim said it was 8 megabyte. Is that correct?
That could be. I don't have one, so I can't really tell you. But yeah, it's basically the entire ROM library of the CoCo can be put on the one card.
Hey, Alexander, do you want to call in on Skype? You want to join us on the Skype call, or you want us just to answer your question here? But Alexander is asking, and I'm not exactly sure how to answer this question, but he's asking, can someone explain the easiest way to get ROMs in the CoCo Flash? Does it really need an MPI? I'm assuming it does, but I'm not the best qualified to say that.
I don't have one, so I can't really tell you. I wish Barry was here today. He could tell you.
Yeah, Barry.
Unfortunately, I don't.
Sorry, Mark. Go ahead.
Couldn't you use DriveWire? I mean, the CoCo SDC supports DriveWire in the HDB DOS. Doesn't the CoCo Flash, couldn't you boot a version with DriveWire and then just rig up a cable and transfer your stuff over?
That's a good point. I would imagine it should.
What
I
are
don't
you,
have one, so I
DriveWire?
don't know.
David? What are you showing us right now?
That's the I need to get that out of the way. But this is the CoCo Flash
Okay.
from Jim.
Nice.
And
I wish Jim
John
was here. He
Strong's
could
case
answer that
for
for
it,
us.
too.
Okay, so that's John Strong's printed case for the CoCo Flash. And what are those little buttons, those external buttons for?
I haven't used them. I think it's to switch between the cartridges, I think. I'm not really sure because there wasn't any documentation with it when I got it, so...
Yeah, I remember Barry Nelson mentioning this, and I'm just trying to go back from that memory, but I think he was basically saying you have to take it from a ROM file to a bin file or vice versa, and he wrote a program to convert it and then copy it in its converted format to the actual flash itself. So there is a conversion process, and to me, not knowing all of the physical logistics, I think you need to have access to the software you want to put on there and access to the flash cartridge at the same time. So I would almost think a multi-pack would be necessary to do this, but somebody else will probably chime in later. I would say, Alexander, to post a message in the Facebook group, and either Barry Nelson and or Jim Brain would answer that for you, because those are kind of the two experts on that. But I would think that's necessary.
Yeah, unless DriveWire does work, that's one other option. We could just use a serial cable to a PC or Mac, but I don't know for sure if that works.
Okay, so
Actually,
Yeah,
I
yeah.
just found a link that Barry put up a little while ago on the news group. And actually, he has a program that will actually take the actual ROM images from the actual archive, convert them, and put them onto the flash.
Okay, but do you know if it requires you to have it in a multi-pack, or like how do you get it onto there?
It actually uses the actual ROM images from the CoCo archive.
Okay, but how do you get them onto the flash is what I'm asking.
Oh, that program he made actually does the conversion and puts them onto the flash.
Okay, but how do you get to the image? Do you have to have
Oh,
like a
you
physical
actually,
floppy drive in there, or do you?
Either a physical floppy or an SDC by the looks of it.
okay,
So-
so it's starting to sound like you need 2 slots and an MPI to do this.
Yeah. We'll have to
Rick-
find out about DriveWire, though. That's a good point, because I mean, DriveWire is supported by a lot of things now, and that would be one where you just make a cable and you hook it up to your PC and get them off there. But we'll have to find out. I'm not sure.
Yeah. Okay. So Richard was asking, and I think Mark answered, can you use a card reader from the PC to transfer disk images to the SD card on the CoCo SDC? And yeah, that answer is yes. That's what I've been doing all along. I have never tried DriveWire yet. I'm really curious to get into DriveWire and try that out for grins and giggles. Getting back to some of your questions too, Grant, about what's the main differences between CoCo 1 and CoCo 2, and for the most part, the CoCo 1 and CoCo 2 are the same machine. It's mostly just some kind of cosmetic differences. There are some design changes, and I would suggest anybody. I'm going to do this plug right now for Grant or anybody else. One of the things that really helped me learn a lot about this was reading Boise and Bill's book here, the Underdog book. So the colorful history of Tandy's Underdog computer. I learned a lot in there about the history of Tandy and how all this stuff came about. So the CoCo 2 was designed really just to cut costs, and one of the main things they did to cut costs was to make the motherboard smaller. So it's a smaller circuit board to save money on materials, and so CoCo 2 is really just a cost savings machine, but they went from silver to white, which white was the color of through the 90s. White and beige was the color of all computers, and they added a better keyboard. But you would think when you go like from an Apple 1 to an Apple 2, yeah, an Apple 2 is a better machine. CoCo 1 and CoCo 2, the CoCo 2 was no quote unquote better, had the exact same processor, exact same version of BASIC, and the exact same set of graphics. It really wasn't until the CoCo 3 did the computer really get better as far as its capabilities with graphics and color and things like that. And when it comes to compatibility, I would say we were probably 95% of most things will run on a CoCo 3. So if you really had to pick one, to answer the question that was also posted on the mailing list, what's your favorite CoCo, or what's the best CoCo to buy? If you can get your hands on a CoCo 3, you're good. The challenge with the CoCo 3 now, and it's not necessarily a challenge, but if you want to hook a CoCo 3 to a better screen, on the bottom of the CoCo 3 is a small non-standard RGB connection. That needs to be converted to something else. And so there are a handful of ways to convert that to VGA. So you can use a VGA monitor. But even now, VGA is kind of outdated, right? Because most modern TVs don't support VGA, things like that. Some people are working on now, I think it was Bill, was taking one of Barry Nelson's designs to convert VGA to SCART and then SCART to HDMI or something. So it's this whole elaborate hack job to, fluster cluck a few different connections together to finally get us on an HDMI connection. I know I'm probably oversimplifying and maybe insulting people at the same time with this, but so but there is an RGB output from the CoCo 3, but it was designed for a Tandy specific monitor they sold called the CM8, Color Monitor 8. So it's kind of a proprietary connector. Cloud9 has an adapter that will convert that to VGA. There's a few other adapters out there that will do that. I think Ed Snyder might have one. A few people have them. What I got from Ed Snyder, and I don't think they're available right now, is I got one that actually converted it from the RGB to S-Video, and I'm using that to run it through my PC, where I can actually live capture it on my PC and watch it on my computer monitor. So that's the biggest challenge, is if you want to get that RGB output, how do I do that? Because you're pretty much, unless you can get an old analog CRT CM8, you're going to have to adapt it to a modern display. And that will sometimes cost you more than the CoCo cost you for all the superfluous adapters and stuff.
Unless you go to CoCo Fest and get it for $35.
There you go.
Get the CM8.
CoCo Fest is a solution for everything.
Yes. Ask your doctor if CoCo Fest is right for you.
Richard Lorbiewski is he's working on an S-Cart HDMI adapter, I think off of the I can't remember the other guy's design now.
Barry Nelson.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
He's working on that too right now.
Yeah, well,
I was looking at the VGA, but there's a number out there, but I like nobody's got any available for sale, it seems.
Cloud9 will. He's actually going to be doing a second run. He's doing a couple of bug fixes. He found some timing problems if you have an 86 gimme versus an 87 gimme. So he has some changes on the ROM in it and type thing. But he is making a new production run a little bit later.
I know that. I just
But he's out right now.
Yeah.
Okay. We have a question from NML32, which is, that's the upgrade from the original NML16. So NML32 says, hello, I have an RGB related question. Go ahead with your question, NML32, whenever you're ready. Richard is also saying that you could probably use some of the other Tandy monitors like the CM4 or the CM5, but you might need to modify the cables on those.
There were multiple analog RGB monitors that used to work, like the NIC Multisync 2, Magnavox 8515, 8516, the original Amiga and some of the Atari ST monitors. I mean, you had to do some cable mucking around and stuff to rewire, but they did work.
Yeah, what NML32 is asking, is there a way to connect the CoCo 3 to a Sony PVM CRT? What is PVM? Which uses BNC connectors, apparently.
Yeah, like closed circuit television.
Okay, it's like a CCTV. I remember some of those old CRTs actually did have those BNC twists, and you had one for red, RGB, red, green, blue, and there was another one that was maybe for black or for H-Sync or V-Sync or something like that. Some of those old TVs had several inputs to get RGB. So,
and most of those BNC connectors on the monitors are usually composite inputs.
Okay.
So do you think that would work then, Bill, or?
It would work for an actual composite signal, not the actual RGB.
That'd be a
Oh, okay.
downgrade. It wouldn't-
But if it's a Sony an NML, correct us if you're wrong, but if this Sony PVM CRT, I'm assuming the CRT has RGB inputs on it, and I'm gonna make a naive, non-electronic engineer statement, but I think just about anything should be able to be converted, right? So the RGB output on the CoCo, there's going to be a handful of signal lines, and if you know what the pinout is and you know what those connections are, if you know what you're doing, theoretically anything can be adapted to connect to anything. Sometimes it's just a connection changer and the signaling is the same. Sometimes you might have to do some signaling conversions, but sometimes it may just be as simple as I got an XYZ head that needs to be adapted to an ABC head, and you just change the wirings and you change the head and you make a dongle doohickey and it works. Is that a fairly true statement?
Sometimes you need upscalers and downscalers too.
Yeah. But I mean, RGB in general should be a fairly common thing. It's just how are we implementing RGB out versus in and adapt the output to the proper input. Okay, so now Paco and Mark are sending out some links in there too. So yeah, feel free to ask more questions and put links out there in the chat. So yeah, there's a group on Facebook too about CRTs that I joined recently too, and so there's a lot of talk on there about the different CRTs and the connections. I've learned something recently too as well, is that we're so used to thinking that digital is better, and we're HD and flat screens and all these things like that, but the old CRTs refreshed faster than our digital screens do, which is why things like light guns don't work, and why some of the purists still like looking at the scan lines and things like that on the CRTs. But I guess it has to do with how the beams of light were hitting the tube directly on the glass screens, where nowadays with the flat panels you have to have a video processor process the whole image like mentally before it flashes it onto the panel display, and there's a slight difference in the timing there that prevents things like light guns from working and stuff. So Michael Brandt saying, I'm glad to have my CM8s. Yeah.
I was just going to say, you're probably talking about me and Nick as far as running the old monitors, because we both still do that.
Yeah, I mean, if I had one, I mean, it's a cool thing to have. It's a piece of nostalgia. It's a piece of history. But the problem with them is they're so freaking big and heavy, too. They take up so much space. A CM8 is what? What's the size of the actual tube? Is it a 12?
It's a 13-inch.
It's a 13-inch screen, but it's the size of like a 20-inch television. And it's the weight of a VW bus. So, and I'm exaggerating slightly, but I'm only saying this because I'm pissed off I wasn't able to buy one in the CoCo Fest auction because I couldn't fit it in my suitcase.
All you had to do was just scrap all your clothes.
Yeah, right. I would gladly be using a CM8 right now, and that's where the CM8 that they were selling, it had an adapter cable on there where somebody took the normal rectangular head and converted that to a VGA head. And so somebody had made a pigtail adapter on there that you could detach and go back straight to a CoCo or go to a PC. So I'm assuming the pinout in that for a PC VGA and that monitor is the same because it was a passive adapter that didn't have any type of, other circuit
From what I
boards.
remember, TTL RGB, which is what the old, Tandy 1000s and the early PCs used, it did work, but I think it didn't let you use the intensity. So you only got the base colors. So you get basically an 8-color display.
Yeah, that sounds right.
Okay. So
I mean,
Michael,
my favorites have always been like either the NEC Multisync 2 because it has a wonderful dot pitch compared to anything else in the market. It's the one I use still. And the Magnavox 8515, 8516 series, which also worked with the Atari ST and the Amigas, because that one had a better dot pitch, so it was a clearer picture. Slightly bigger, was a 14-inch versus a 13-inch, and it also had composite and RGB, and you could just switch between them whenever you wanted to. So it's great for a CoCo 3 because I'm playing a CoCo 1-2 game. I need artifact and colors. You just hit a switch, you're done.
Yeah, it's like switching inputs on the screen.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was the big, like when I first got my Color Computer 3 with the CM8, not having those artifact colors. And I'll even go as far as, and when I say artifact, if anybody out there doesn't even know what that means, you know, the original color computer mode was a black and white mode. But the way the TV worked was that depending if you had a vertical stripe, if it was on an even or odd position, it would look like it was red or blue. So they actually took the opportunity to take like alternating stripes of black and white stripes to create the illusion of red and blue colors on the screen. So that's what we're talking about when we say artifacting. So when you play these games that have like black and white plus red and blue, the red and blue colors are really false colors produced by the television's lack of interpretation of the signal, for better terms. So it was a hack. You know, it was almost like a byproduct of bad technology that we saw these colors. When we switched to the new CoCo 3, which is using a RGB monitor, which is a much better technology, it got rid of those fake colors. It showed us the exact black and white lines. And then so all the games that we're used to playing that didn't do it, boom, they look like crap now, right? So imagine playing Donkey Kong that used to be red, white, and blue. Now it's just black and white. It just doesn't look as good. So what Curtis was just mentioning is that his monitor could switch between composite and RGB and give you the best of both worlds. Okay, I have two more questions here in the chat. Alexander Wallace, hey, another question. Can CoCo 1 be installed? Can you install a 6309 processor? I just opened my new CoCo 1 and noticed the socket, which would make it easier. Michael Brandt said, yes, 6309 can be used on a CoCo 1, 2, and 3. There you go.
Yes, and it runs cooler, so it actually helps the machine last longer. Never mind all the extra instructions.
That is a neat thing that I didn't know about originally. I think a lot of people didn't know about originally. Which I learned about, again, shameless plug for Boise and Bill's book, but that newer processor, which was made by Hitachi, not only does it do everything the original Motorola processor did, but it allowed for a lot more newer, better things that, you know, was kind of the inspiration for Nitrous 9, right, the newer operating system.
Not inspiration, a requirement.
Requirement, right?
For the original version. I mean, now they've back.
Right. Well, that's what I mean. But that's what inspired you guys to make that version, was the fact that this processor could do more things, right? So yeah, if somebody's buying a CoCo now and your CoCo has a bad processor, and are these 6309s still fairly available?
Oh yes.
Yeah. So they're Go ahead, Bill.
I just picked up 10 of them for $12.
So yeah,
a box of Cracker Jacks. No,
so it is definitely a way to you know, repair an old CoCo that maybe the CPU is bad. I think the main difference between, like, the CoCo 1, the processor was in a socket, so it was an easy replacement. You pull one out, you put in a new one. The newer CoCo 2s and the CoCo 3s, the CPU is not in a socket. So it's a little bit more of an actual act of surgery to get them out. And I've heard people basically cut off the legs to basically take the head off of the old chip and then desolder each leg, which is easier than trying to, you know, possibly damage the motherboard, and then put a new socket in.
That is the easiest method.
Yeah, yes. That's what I've heard. I'm afraid to try it. I think I will wait till I find a dead CoCo, and I will practice my soldering skills on a cadaver, so I don't kill a real patient. So
you're braver than me, because I won't even try it, because I suck at soldering. my soldering skills is called Bill.
Yeah, Bill. Yeah, we had when
I used to solder okay, but my eyes don't anymore. So.
Yeah. Yeah, I've heard people say that in the comments on the different groups. You know, like, my eyes and hands aren't what they used to be.
Yeah. Okay, Mark's got the solution there.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, the magnifier.
Look at that. He's like a jeweler over here. He's going to work on a diamond while he's at it too. What's the color clarity and cut of that diamond there, Mark? Okay, Richard says I've got 50 of them. So Richard's got a couple of 6309s too. So yeah.
Yeah, no, it definitely works on the CoCo 1 and 2. I mean, advantage, even if you don't have in the software that takes advantage, is that it runs, because it's CMOS, it runs up at like literally a 1/100th the power or something like that. So it runs cooler. It decreases the heat inside the CoCo 1 or 2 case. So it actually will help the rest of the components last longer because they're not getting overheated as much. So it's just generally a nice upgrade all the way around. And then if you have the software take advantage of it, I mean, it can do all kinds of things. There's even stuff in the CoCo 1 and 2 that you could write games that would be much faster and better than they were on the 6809. So I don't think anybody's quite done that yet. Hint, hint, Nick. And I can't remember, is the Nitrous 9 project, because I kind of got out of it before they started backporting it all, have they done a 6309 OS9 level 1?
Yes. Yeah,
Okay, so we actually have software that will take advantage of it now for even on a CoCo 1 or 2 then.
Okay, so Richard's got sockets and processors. Yeah, we might need to. I might need to hit you up, Richard, for a socket and a processor. Because I think that would be a neat. What is that? Are those the sockets there, Mark?
Yeah, these are machine pin sockets.
Oh wow, you're an animal.
I bought them for some reason.
Yeah.
It's pretty thin, right?
It's one of those things, it's here. I mean, here I'll give you a similar story. Like right now, my glasses that I'm wearing, my glasses are like almost 2 years old now. They're out of warranty, but I got them at Walmart, and I've gone there twice now, and they just happen to have the spare parts that were needed to get them fixed. So when my nose piece fell out, they had an extra nose piece. The other day, the arm fell off of these things, and they had the specific screw that they needed to put it back in. And so holding on to these rare, obscure parts comes in handy at some point in time.
Now, it's a nice chip. So, I mean, as Nick has been finding out lately, and Bill and I have known for years, it's the most powerful 8-bit CPU ever made. Yeah,
well, he put it in his blog. If you read the latest the new blog for Gunstar, it's like the 6809 is the second best 8-bit processor, and the 6309 is the best. So
you should actually put a link to his blog in the YouTube chat too, so that gets for the people that are listening.
And let me find it. Yeah,
I did the memory upgrade and the CPU upgrade, not because I was looking for anything bigger or better, but for the very purpose of lowering the heat.
Yeah,
and getting along, because it's my CoCo 3, the gimme went. And so Mark Marlette fixed that for me, and then I got thinking, gosh, if you can upgrade me with something that's going to make my CoCo last longer, then let's do it. I did just for that reason.
Yeah, because his 512K upgrade, the Triad, is much lower power in heat too, and then the 609 is also much lower power in heat, so the whole case cools off. So.
Yeah, well, actually, I ran a test on my CoCo 3, and I actually put a temperature sensor inside the case, and it actually runs at a constant 23 degrees Celsius.
Really?
What temperature is that in America?
Room temperature.
About 73, 74.
Okay, thank you. Us Americans don't do math. We're too proud.
Except your drug
we
dealers.
like
They
our
apparently use
imperial
metric.
standards.
Yeah, it's the only time the metric standards used in the U.S. is when you're buying, grams. I need a 28-gram bag, please.
Well, even the medical profession in the States uses metric too.
Yes, that's true. That's true.
Scientists.
Yeah. I remember NASA had that one probe crash because somebody translated the tube wrong, and actually, I can't remember if it crashed or if it missed Mars and flew off into the nether regions of space. But
No, it crashed spectacularly. JPL used trick, and I think Lockheed Space Systems thought it was all American English. Imperial.
Didn't that happen with the Hubble Space Telescope as well? Someone ground the lens at the different. I think that happened too. So it went up half blind.
I think the story with the Hubble is that they ground it because whoever assumed it was going to be used in the atmosphere, in space. So they ground it with all the corrections. For if you had it on the Earth. And no, it goes in space. It has to have a different range. No.
Yeah, there's been a few different space programs issues that have happened because different teams worked on things, and the rest of the world does everything in the metric system, and only United States uses the standard system. So I think some of the original Mars probes overshot where they were supposed to go because they had not everybody was on the same page with the units of measure and distance when they were calculating things and stuff too. So it's pretty crazy. It's like there's what is it? What else do we not do right? Like we do telephones different than the rest of the world too. Like the rest of Europe and everybody else does their phone systems different than how we do ours and stuff. So it's just like there's a couple things that we just do 'cause America, we just do it however we do it. So
Most of that stuff, I think, is more like a North American versus European thing. Because
Okay.
Canada and the States, for the most part, our stuff's compatible. Our power grid, telephone systems.
okay,
We're all using the same thing. It's just on measurements, you guys are way behind.
okay, and temperatures and all that kind of stuff, right?
Make us change.
Yeah, right. Well, that's why I like 0 is freezing, 100 is boiling. It's very simple.
Yeah, it was designed to be simple.
We need it that way.
For
Not
temperature,
212.
if you want to convert the Celsius, you double it and you add 30.
You double it
That
and you
gives you
add
rough-
3.
Yeah, 30.
So, you double it and you add 30.
So you
Yeah,
get way more metric beers than you do.
Yeah,
your
yes. You get a lot more metric beers. Eh?
Exactly.
Instead of it being a 12-ounce can, so now that's like what? Like that's 24. That's like 54 ounces, eh? That's good. That's good. It's metric beer. The CoCo cat has come by to say hello.
Good.
Gizmo the CoCo cat. Yeah, I would definitely recommend everybody grab a copy of Boise and Bill's book. It's a great book. It does explain a lot about. Evan Wright said I was just about to make the metric beer joke. I'm too slow. Welcome, Evan Wright. How are you?
Welcome.
Evan Wright is here. If anybody who's in the text chat wants to join us on Skype chat, just send me a friend request on Skype and we can add you to the call. Yeah, it's good stuff. So if getting back to an earlier question between what Grant had asked and what was on the mailing list, what's the best CoCo to buy? Probably a CoCo 3. But when you get into the CoCo 3 now, well, there's technically a couple different shades of CoCo 3, right? So your stock CoCo 3 that you will find most commonly on eBay is the 128K CoCo 3. That was probably the most popular model sold, at least in North America. I know there were some 512Ks sold by Radio Shack, but if I had to guess, the majority of the 512Ks you're going to find were self-upgraded units. So can you find a 512K CoCo on eBay? Well, it really depends. But if you can't find one, Cloud9 Software is where you can get that upgraded. And then if you want the ultimate in luxury and power, then you would really want a 512K CoCo with a 6309 processor, right? So again, will you find one of those on eBay? I got really lucky. I bought Neil Blanchard's, right? So the first CoCo 3 I bought was a 6309 512K CoCo 3. So I hit the jackpot.
Through eBay?
Through eBay, yeah. Neil Blanchard had one that he had an extra. He put it on eBay, and I just won the auction. And I got it.
Did you know who Neil was at that time?
Yeah, I did, because he had mentioned it on the podcast.
Brookings, or?
Yeah, Neil Brookings. Yeah, Neil Brookings. Yes, yeah. They had mentioned it on the podcast that we've got one of these things out there, and I saw it and I bid on it, and luckily I got it. So when I won the bid, I sent him an email. I go, Neil, can you send me an autograph? So he actually took an old silver Tandy floppy sleeve and autographed it for me and everything else too. So hey, Glenn Hewlett is here. Hey, Glenn. We have some more CoCo people here. Evan Wright is here. Glenn is here. Guys, if you want to call in on Skype, go ahead and try and do that too. You might need to add me as a friend on Skype. Okay, here's Patrick Coultier has just added me a friend request. Okay, do you want to be on CoCo Talk? Somebody sent me a friend request. Patrick Cloutier, I guess. I can't read. I'm American.
Cloutier?
Cloutier? Who knows?
Cloutier?
Yes. Yes, who knows? So Evan or Glenn or anybody else, if you're out there watching and you want to join the verbal conversation, we're on Skype. We're happy to have you. What would be the best CoCo to have if you only had to have one? It would be a 512K CoCo 3 with the 6309 processor, and you can run everything. But that is not always going to be easy to get, right? CoCo 2s are very common. They average $50. For just the computer. You go to buy a bundle, you might spend more money. If it's in the box, it might be more money. I've seen people selling CoCo 2s for $189, and they're on crack. You know what I mean? But those are rare and vintage When you put the word rare or vintage in front of something in eBay, apparently it quadruples the value. But the normal CoCo 2s average $50. So they're pretty common. In a 64K, if you see a CoCo 2 that says 64K, it's going to have extended color basic. There was no standard basics with 64K. That'll let you run 100% of the CoCo 1 and 2 library. It'll run everything. CoCo 3s will run 95% of the CoCo 1 and 2 libraries. Some of the newer CoCo 3 games, though, are written for 512K, like Stockmaster's Donkey Kong requires that. Popstar Pilot requires that. So some of the newer games are going to require 512K of RAM.
Well, even some of the older ones like Sinistar and Contras require 512.
Yeah, there were some of the older ones too, right?
Yeah.
So, but if you're lucky, you'll find a CoCo 3 128K for an average of $100 to $200, and then you're going to have to get the upgrade. What's the upgrade cost? About $50. You can buy that Triad board. It's about $50.
Yeah, I think it's around that. And then the 6 through 9, but that requires a bit of soldering skills.
Right,
or
but
if you
so then you're so where do you end up with all these options here? I think you can buy them from Cloud9 Software fully loaded. I think Mark has some on supply, and he will do all the upgrades for you, make sure it works, and send them to you. So maybe I'll take one moment to switch over to my CoCo page, which is called I'mACoconut.com. Do I have it on my screen? CoCo 3 Curtis. Yeah, okay. So here you go. On my webpage, my webpage is called ogsteviestro.com, but I created a page called I'mACoconut.com, right? It just goes to my CoCo links page. If you look under, where would this be right now? Okay, I think so if you look under buy, sell, trade, under buy, sell, trade is Cloud9. If you go to Cloud9, this is where you can buy memory boards. This is where you can buy processors, and I think you can buy CoCo 3s here. I'm not mistaken. You might want to email Mark Marlette. If you're in the Facebook group or the CoCo mailing list, you can email him. You can go to Cloud9 to go there. Where do we go to get the CoCo SDCs? Well, this is Ed Snyder's group, which is called the Zipster Zone. His name is Ed Snyder, and you can reach Ed Snyder in the mailing list and on the Facebook group. So Ed Snyder makes the CoCo SDC, which is kind of a must-have thing, right? Now, unfortunately, most of the stuff that Ed makes, he makes the circuit board. He doesn't make the case. So who makes the cases? Well, John Strong makes the cases, right? So John Strong from Strongware makes all the 3D printed cases. So I've been trying to compile resources on this one page. So if you need to know something about something in the color computer community, I've got a fairly good collection of it here on this page. And if somebody's not here that needs to be there, you let me know and I'll put you on there. Because for me, it's been a voyage of discovery as well. You know, I've gotten back into the CoCo thing a little less than 2 years ago, and I'm still learning a lot. The greatest resources are, I've said this a million times, I'm going to sound like a broken record, but the book, the Colorful History of Tandy's Underdog Computer, CoCo. It's a great book. It's a great thing to have. Another great resource is the CoCo Crew podcast. There's now 2 years worth of these podcasts. I've learned a lot. And the first 6 episodes of listening to that podcast, I learned more than the 6 years I owned my original color computer by listening to the tech segments and understanding how the hardware works. And there's a million things that happened that I didn't understand that I now understand a little better. So the CoCo Crew podcast has been great. The Facebook group is great. The mailing lists are great. All these things you can get to from my website. So there are great resources out there for everyone. And, I'm going to be the last person to say that I'm an expert in anything. I'm an expert at playing games very badly. That's about it. So I am not a hardware expert. I know nothing about electronics. All I know is that when I don't pay my bill, my electricity stops working. That's about my knowledge of electronics. I'm not a software expert. I'm a guy who loves the machine, and I'm very fortunate that there's people like all these people on the screen above me here and in this community where we all share our knowledge about this machine. And I know that was one of our topics a couple weeks ago was what's it like to be in the community? And I think we all agreed that there really is no there is no hazing or shaming in the community. So if you ask the quote-unquote dumb question, nobody gets on your case for doing that. And you're going to probably ask a question that's been asked 1,000 times before, but it's the first time, it's a new problem for you. And the good news is everybody's really good about just kind of sharing that knowledge, And I'm glad we're having talks like this where we can continue to discuss things. And this was a topic that was brought up. Let's have the beginner, non-technical discussion. But anybody who's watching this now or in the future, if you have a question that you'd like discussed in the future, or you have a topic you'd like to discuss in the future, we'd love to, make sure we can address whatever it is that people want to know about when it comes to these computers. All these faces above me, these guys are the experts. I'm not the expert. I'm just a guy who likes to talk.
I mean, like Grant is a perfect example. He's just getting back into the CoCo after decades, and the memory's a bit rusty on all this stuff. He probably knew it back in the day, and feel free to ask any questions. I mean,
yeah. I mean, most of any of the quote-unquote expertise I have now, I've gained in the past 2 years from the community, from this kind of Borg collective, So I have assimilated this knowledge, and it's a lot of it out there. So I mean, I wasn't. None of us are born with knowledge. It's just what you gain through life. And hopefully share.
Well, and the other thing too is changed that because used to we'd write a program, we would save it to, or you would save it to a floppy drive. Well, you can't do that today. So that's kind of changed a little bit as well.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you can if you have the floppies.
Yeah. If you can find them.
Yeah. But see, here's the great thing, Grant, is with the CoCo SDC is you can create a virtual floppy on the fly. It'll create that image for you, and then it's on the SDC card. You can then copy it back to your PC, make a backup of it, load it in an emulator, whatever,
Share it.
Yeah. So I've been actually
put it onto a real floppy.
Exactly, and put it onto a real floppy.
And vice versa.
And vice versa. I started off doing things in an emulator, and then I copied them to the SDC card and ran them on a real CoCo. So some of my basic programming I started virtually. I've now done kind of physically on the real hardware through the SD card. So I am definitely not trying to bash the flash cartridge at all. It's a great product, but I think for most people's needs, the CoCo SDC is the perfect solution for everyday use of using your CoCo like a normal CoCo. The flash cartridge has lots of other advantages for doing, cartridge-based things and storing lots of images that you can load up very quickly and easily. But I think for normal day-to-day operations, CoCo SDC is a great product.
You can have both.
Yep.
We'll talk about what's rare right now on eBay and in general. CoCo 3s are rare, and multi-pack interfaces are rare. Multi-pack interface is a little sidecar you plug into your computer to be able to plug more doohickeys into it, right? So Ed Snyder has created what's called a mini MPI, a miniature multi-pack interface. It's got just 2 slots, and so you can buy that from Ed, and John Strong makes the case for that. And I don't remember the price on that, but what is the price? It's not expensive either. It's something like $50 for the thing, and it's well under $100 for the thing and the case, which is less than you would pay on eBay. All right, so on eBay, multi-packs go pretty high, right? Multi-packs start at $100 and go up, and then you still have to pay shipping. Okay, $80. Richard's saying it's about $80. Okay, Richard says, same here. Was into the CoCo back in the 80s and 90s, now coming up to speed. Glenn Hewlett says, I came back to the CoCo about 9 months ago. A lot to catch up on for me, too. The CoCo community has been a great help. So Michael Brandt says the mini MPI comes with its own case, so it is a package deal. Okay, so it's about $80 for the MPI and the case, and it's going to work. It only has 2 slots, and for the most part, you don't usually need more than 2 things at a time. So you could have like your SDC and your flash cartridge to transfer images back and forth. You can have your SDC and a real floppy controller to copy things from real floppies to virtual floppies. You could have then like your SDC and like a speech sound cartridge or an Orchestra 90 to take advantage of those. Most of the times you don't need, for average use, you don't need more than 2 slots. It was only when you were doing like a serial card for printers and modems and a bunch of crap like that did you really need 4 cards at once.
Or running a print shop, right, Bill?
Yes.
I would say
every slot filled.
And each card was multi-function I/O, so that was huge.
Wow. Yeah. Okay, and so
And then-
yeah, David Ladd was saying that the CoCo Flash also includes basically the Orchestra 90 compatible stereo output as well. So it's a two for one deal there.
I did not realize that, so that's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, it works nicely. And it's a 3.5 millimeter jack.
A headphone
Therefore,
jack.
you can use it with the current, your 3.5 to 3.5 cables that you'd use like from your cell phone to your car stereo or something like that. You just
But directly plug in headphones.
Yeah. Headphones.
I
Yeah.
don't know.
Yeah. If it's a headphone jack, you should be able to plug headphones into it
But it
and
might be
listen to it directly.
Yeah, it might
I
be
think
line
it might
level
be line
instead
level.
of.
Okay,
Be
so it's
really
like
quiet.
it's a preamp versus an amplified. Okay.
Yep.
And then Michael Brandt says with some of the new sound cards that might change as far as needing new slots. I'm needing multiple slots, but the way John Linville is going to do it is the sound chip's going to be built into the ROM cartridge. John Strong might do it differently, but again, I think if you have a sound card that's a separate card, as long as you have an SDC and a sound card, you're probably good. Be hard pressed. I mean, I'm having a hard time imagining why you need more than two things at once. But convenience is having, And again, I got lucky. I got an MPI on eBay, and I got one at a decent price. And mine had to be updated with a different chip. It was called the PAL chip, and I had to change that so it was compatible with the CoCo 3. But that was an easy change too. Ed Snyder sent me that chip. Ed Snyder has been a great resource for anything hardware related. If you need it, he's got it. He doesn't charge hardly anything for whatever he's selling, and is a great resource.
Yeah.
Alexander Wallace is asking, is anyone still using a printer with the CoCo? I heard someone mention they use a laser HP. Very curious how you drive one.
Yes, you can. I've ran a laser in mine. Not anymore, but I have. And I also ran some of the inkjets at the same time. It's basically just as long as you know the control codes for the printer. Some printers will accept just a text file and print it too. Some you have to send control codes and stuff to do everything because you're basically drawing things with pixels. I at one time did a little driver thing for what the heck was it? The Canon 4100 inkjet or something like that. So I had stuff for setting fonts and all kinds of stuff in there, even running the test modes and stuff there too. So yeah, it's possible. You probably need a serial to parallel converter or something. And now most printers are going USB, etc. So that's getting a bit more complicated, but not impossible.
Not impossible. Yeah. So
And another thing where DriveWire comes in handy.
Yeah, I need to learn DriveWire. I think that might be a good topic for one of our talks. Is just to go over DriveWire.
Well, especially since you haven't ran it before, Steve,
I haven't
you can
run it
actually
before.
do a demonstration with people helping you
Yeah.
of how to set it up and get it running and what you can do with it. It'd be a good topic.
Actually, it's really easy. The most difficult thing for me was getting the cable right.
Yeah. I purchased a cable from Cloud9. I still have it in the bubble wrap envelope that I haven't opened yet because I just haven't had any need for it. I'll tell you why I'm interested in DriveWire now. And so I haven't ordered the Raspberry Pi 3 yet, but I want to order the Raspberry Pi 3 and try Ron Klein's CoCo Pi image that he's created. I called him the other day. We spoke on the phone for a while. Because we were like doing Facebook messaging back and forth, and I'm like, I'm driving, I'm in the car, I don't want to message. So we chatted, and I just picked his brain about this project and everything else. I haven't seen it yet, but I understand it very well. It is a really cool project. I really want to get a Raspberry Pi 3 running the CoCo stuff. We mentioned that the best single CoCo to have is a CoCo 3 with 512K and a Hitachi 6309 processor. But guess what? You can emulate that in MAME, right? So, and the CoCo Pi 3 is running MAME. And so MAME will run every version of the CoCo 1, 2, or 3, with any configuration of RAM and any configuration of CPUs that you can come up with. So, and it has DriveWire support built into it. And it also has, it's sharing out a folder where your Raspberry Pi 3 shows up on your home network, so you can just drag and drop files to the system over the network. So if you need to load up games and ROMs and disk images to your Raspberry Pi. Once it's on your Wi-Fi, you just drag and drop to it through your home network, so you don't even have to pull your SD card out anymore to do that kind of stuff. So where this has got my brain thinking is, what happens if I'm running DriveWire on a PC that's on my home network, and this Raspberry Pi is on my home network? Will DriveWire find itself over the network, or does DriveWire require that physical cable to work?
You will need, in the case of MAME or XROR or VCC, all three of them, you will need to give the IP address of the host machine that's running DriveWire server.
Okay. And once I do that...
Yeah. With MAME, VCC, or XROR, you'll need the specific ROM for that specific edition of the CoCo that you're trying to run for, and or Nitrous 9 if you're wanting to run Nitrous 9, but you just use the appropriate images and you're ready to go.
So you're saying that it will work over Wi-Fi, it'll work over the network?
Yes.
Okay.
That's
so that is when DriveWire is going to be really appealing to me, is when I can have something like a Raspberry Pi CoCo 3 accessing disk images off of my PC from my living room. And I can be playing it on my big screen with a wireless joystick, and now my CoCo has become like an Xbox, and I'm sitting on my fat ass on my couch, reclining, playing games.
Yeah. By the way, Hugo's trying to get in on the call there, so if you want to help him with that.
Bonjour. Hugo.
You have to back scroll probably a bit there.
Well, why doesn't he just try to call in? Is he no longer in the CoCoTALK group?
Yeah, he said trying to join and then hasn't been able to get in yet. So I don't know if he.
Now, do we have a problem with the joystick still working on the emulators though on our PCs?
For the most part, yes.
If you're talking about VCC 1.43b, you can blame me. That was my fault that the PC joystick stuff got broke. But that was corrected when it came up to version 2.01. So as far as XROR, I've not had any problems using joysticks with it.
The issue that I've had, and I've tried multiple emulators, is the issue is that when you connect a PC joystick to your emulator, and the CoCo joystick reads from 0 to 63 on both axes, right? When you plug in these joysticks and you run a little basic program to try to read the accesses, I can never get into the corners, and so like the far corners were always kind of clipped and unreadable in the range of motion from the Xbox controllers and other controllers. So I then went as far as buying the original Craft joystick, which was the exact same joystick as the CoCo, but for the 15-pin PC adapter. Then I got an adapter from there to USB and plugged that in. That also did not read the exact values. And so the problem that I had was not getting a joystick to be recognized by an emulator. It was getting the full 360-degree corner-to-corner range of motion recognized by the games. So your mileage may vary, but I've tried multiple controllers and adapters to make it happen. I could not get it to work, and what I ended up having sent to me by Jason Steerl is he created a 6-pin DIN CoCo gamepad adapter to USB, so I could use real CoCo joysticks on a modern PC emulator and get the full range of motion. So when I do use an emulator, I am using real hardware. Depending on the controllers you use, like I say, your mileage may vary. Now, what Ron Klein has said is that the Wii U controller, which is a Bluetooth controller, it looks just like an Xbox controller. He says that's Bluetooth, and when you pair that to the Raspberry Pi, he gets the full range of motions on the analog sticks. And so that's another reason why I'm looking forward to trying that thing out, is I'd love to be able to use an Xbox controller and play CoCo games in my living room, you know. Richard, hello everyone from Blackpool, England. I had a CoCo 2 when I was young, and I am hoping to emulate one soon so I can do 6809 assembly. Well, yeah, there is. Welcome, Richard. There's definitely there's no shortage of ways to emulate a CoCo. And I think we had this discussion a while ago. We were talking about VCC over other emulators, which is the best one. I hate to use the word best because it's just kind of not fair.
It's more best for your circumstances.
Yes, and yeah. I think in most cases VCC is definitely the most user friendly and user accessible emulator, and it's the easiest one to get off the ground running with. There are some issues with it compatibility wise. There is no perfect emulator. The closest one to perfect is MAME, and the problem with that one is it's a pain in the ass to use. So, XRoar is great with artifacting and everything else, but it's a pain in the ass to load cartridges. There's not one perfect emulator. So for most purposes, if you just want to get up and running on a CoCo, VCC is an easy way to do it. Evan Wright says, I use MAME because it has a debugger. Yeah, I've heard that too, right? So
it's a beautiful debugger.
Yeah. That's something I'm going to have to learn in one of these days. So I'll probably switch over. I use MAME. I'm definitely not going to... because I'm familiar with it, I use it, and I'm very capable of being productive with MAME and with the CoCo. It's not for everybody. And I haven't done a how-to video on how to set that one up yet either. So...
well, just getting ROMs that work with it is a pain in the ass because they keep changing the way the check goes, and you get a new version of MAME, all of a sudden your old ROMs, which are perfectly fine, don't work anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. But I am looking forward to one day doing a demo on the CoCo Raspberry Pi project. Richard is saying that the VCC doesn't work well on the Interbank incident. And Glenn Hewlett saying, I use MAME for emulation and LW tools for assembly together. It's amazing compared to how we used to assemble in the 80s. Yeah. LW tools is a tool set. Is that William Assel's setup?
Yeah.
Yes.
All right. So what is that called? A cross compiler where you're doing your work on a modern computer and then...
Yeah, cross assembler.
Yeah.
Cross assembler, yeah.
It does both OS9 and RS-DOS. So you got...
So it actually performs the assembly compiling as well and generates the binary file on the PC?
Yeah.
Yes.
So you're using the speed of the modern processor, so I'm assuming you're going to compile a lot faster?
Yeah, that's why Nick and I don't use it, because that just doesn't remind us of the old days, so we do it old school.
And then you do a quick compile, you send that over to the old machine, and then it still runs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When
I do a complete build of Nitrous 9, it actually takes about 5 minutes.
It takes a bit longer than that on the real hardware.
Richard is asking if modern tools work better than EdTasm Plus.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Even though I still use the old tools myself, because that's part of my retro. My whole mindset of programming assembly, especially under OS 9, was I would have a window running my source code, and then I'd have my assembler running. And then while I was assembling it down a huge program, this may take a couple of minutes, I'd be sitting there going through the code looking for what's the next part I can start working on and start thinking, and that's the way my whole thought process works. So when you go bink and it's done, it's just like I haven't had a chance to think of anything else, and I sit there for a couple of minutes trying to think. So for me, it just works better the old way.
You actually needed that time for your brain to kind of decompress and...
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was just I got used to doing it that way, and for me, it's still the most comfortable. It's definitely not the most efficient.
Workflow.
And I think Nick's probably similar that way.
Yeah.
Whereas Bill is all modern stuff.
No, I'm actually going back to using Scred, Kurt.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Well, I think when I start learning assembly, I want to start it in EdTasm because I think that's like the pure way to start. And then once I've learned it a little bit, I'll probably want to embrace some time-saving techniques on future projects. But I want to go through some struggle when I learn it. I want to.
You'll be able to follow William Barton's excellent book on
that's my plan.
assembly, and it uses EdTasm.
very specifically.
That's my plan. Yeah, that's why. Yeah, and I'm hoping I can.
And
run
to be
it from
honest,
a
on
CoCo.
small projects, speed isn't an issue. You can assemble a 250 byte program in a second or two on Edtasm. It's not slow. It's when you're doing big projects like Nick or me or Bill are doing that becomes a big drag.
Yeah, I look forward to doing that because when I was my younger days, when I got my CoCo 2, I stayed away from assembly language because I just thought that was like the adult language and it was
Yeah,
too
that's the same thing
complicated.
Steve has said it in the past too. So it's to be honest, even for me, it took me 3 or 4 years before I even tried doing even the smallest routine because it just scared the hell out of me, to be honest.
Especially when you saw the typing they did in the rainbows. You're like,
Yeah,
wow,
these huge
what's
listings.
that?
This clears the screen, and it's like multiple lines. So yeah, it's intimidating. But once you get into it, once you get that first hit of speed, where you do something in assembly, just a little routine, scroll the screen or something in sideways or whatever, and you see that, and you see how fast it goes compared to what you try to do in basic, and then you kind of get hooked, and then you start getting more and more into it. So
it only looks more efficient with all that typing. It actually is much.
Well, I think that might be one benefit too to using a PC is being able to type on a natural keyboard that is more responsive. Because every time I try to type on the CoCo keyboard, I just want to smash it. And the one thing that my deluxe joystick is very lucky in the fact that it's 35 years old and I don't have a spare 2-button one, or I would have broke it 50 games ago trying to play games on, especially Popstar Pilot. I would have rage smashed that controller a long time ago. But every
Steve,
time
you might have to get Cloud9's PS2 keyboard adapter, then you can actually run a PC keyboard on the real thing. So
right. So every time I get ready to smash that joystick, I go, I can't do it. Can't afford another one. So,
but you can adapt a PC keyboard to run on a CoCo, and Bill and I got quite used to that with the TC9 too. So it's quite a common today.
Yeah, I have like a nice Logitech ergonomic cordless keyboard with like a palm rest and the whole 9 yards. So it's very, very comfortable for me to type on this versus the CoCo. I only have one 2-button deluxe joystick, Michael. I have a couple of the 1-button ones, but I've only got one of 2 buttons. Michael Brandt says I think I can fix that. He might have a few extra deluxe joysticks. Okay, that would be good to know. So.
Just reading some of the other comments in the chat too. Richard's asking. He says he has a 6-9 programming reference manual. What's your favorite book for CoCo 2 programming? I would rank Barden's TEPCO's by Lawrence Teppold. He had one on specifically for the CoCo 1 and 2, and then he did an addendum for the CoCo 3. There was another one. Don and Kurt Inman did one specifically on color computer assembly language graphics that was really good for the graphics and sound. That's what it concentrated on. It didn't do like sorts and a bunch of other weird stuff. Leventhal's is a good one if you're into the technical side. Yeah. And that's a hard one if you're just starting assembly to learn how to do anything because it's written very technically. It's a great reference book, though.
Here is
and there's 6 or 9 books, too, just to mention.
And are those on the archive websites?
Yeah, most if not all.
Is the William Barden book on the archive website?
That one is. The TEPCO one for sure is.
Okay. So here's a copy of the William Barden book. So I actually ended up getting a couple of these because every time sometimes I'll buy a computer that comes with the books and I'll get a few spares. I probably bought one of these on the auction too, just because they're kind of cool to have. So yeah, I like having the old paper book too. Sometimes it's just nice to go through. So yeah, this is the book that I'll be using when I start to learn assembly. Will be the Barden book because I understand that's kind of like a really good starting point, especially to use Edtasm and everything else. Yeah.
This is the TEPCO one too, which I think I got a bit more into the graphics and sound a bit more than the Barden book did. So I found it a pretty good reference too. And if you can find it, it's a rare one. Don and Kurt Inman had the assembly language graphics for the color computer that solely concentrates. It was actually you write a Space Invaders game as part of the tutorial in the book. It's a really good one, but it's hard to find.
I would love to find that one, yeah.
Another good one is the 6809 Micro Language Lab from Dennis Battery Keats, too. That's another good one.
Yep.
And that one is available in the archive.
Okay.
I forgot about that one. He actually had a cassette learning lab that went with that, too.
Those are actually online. You can get those. And he had a few copies of those. I bought one of them from a couple of years ago, but I think he's out now. He had like 15 copies or something of the original printed.
Yeah.
Very, very cool. I'm sure we haven't scratched the surface on questions that people will have, but I think this was a great idea that we came up with this attempt at trying to be non-technical and user-friendly. But at any given time, anytime we have a CoCo Talk, it is open to any question. It doesn't matter. And I know we've said it, and maybe it's worth saying it again. Everybody in this community is very accommodating with sharing their knowledge, and it doesn't matter if you're a rookie, if you're new, if you don't have to be a hardware electronics engineer or a software engineer to be a CoCo nut, and have a CoCo. And if you have a question, it's okay. You're among friends. You're in a safe space, right? So in this safe space of CoCodom, there's never a question that you'll be shunned for asking, unless you're going to start asking about Apple products, and then we might get out the sock and the bar of soap. So, but as long as it's a CoCo question, there are no dumb CoCo questions. There are no bad CoCo questions. So, in a future talk, whatever these guys are rambling about, if you have a simple question, just yell it out in the chat, and we'll try to get to it. And address it in the future.
I think we'll try to do a mix of like themed ones, because every once in a while we'll come up with an idea, we want to try it and see how it works, like we did this time around. Like another one I've thought of that I don't think I've even talked to Steve about, it's a little bit different than some of the ones we've been doing lately, is to have a game playing one where you can give tips and tricks for playing your favorite games, or little cheats and stuff like that, or techniques that you can do to do better in a game. Maybe throw in a few cheat pokes, so if you're getting too frustrated, you can just change and give yourself 255 men. Kind of cover another part of the CoCo scene that Steve does a lot of covering on his own page, but we don't really have a discussion on it.
True. And like projects, if somebody has a project, hopefully from time to time, when Nick Marentes gets a little bit further down the road with his new game, we can maybe have him share some information. We want to do an interview with Bruce and Jacob on Forest of Doom, so we can maybe have some of these talks be kind of a project overview / Q&A session. So there's really no wrong way to talk about CoCo stuff if you like talking about CoCo stuff. So yeah, that's the great thing about this, is this whole thing started completely randomly, kind of unplanned, and it's just kind of become a thing that continues to take shape, I like the idea of having a topic. I like the idea of sometimes having an agenda, and I like and there's been plenty of talks where we didn't know what we were going to talk about, and it didn't stop us, so it can be, and each one could be a mixture of all of those too. So
maybe we do segmented talks, kind of like they do on the podcast, where they have a certain section for news and a certain section for tech talks and stuff. Maybe we do the same thing. We have just a general free-for-all for 1 hour, and we have a themed one if we have a theme that particular week for the other part of the hour or whatever. We can vary it up. So
yeah. So I think things will take shape over time. This has only been our 7th show, and I think the good thing about this too is the fact that it is so dynamic, that we can bounce back and forth at any given time. So sometimes the lack of structure is kind of good to talk about a variety of things. So it's good. So the only way we're going to know what people want to talk about or what people want to hear about is to get some feedback. So make sure you guys leave comments on these videos, or reach out to us on Facebook. Reach out on my website, ogsteviestro.com. If you want to find out, if you're new to the color computer community, I have tried to compile as much information in one place as possible on my website. So if you go there, it's a good launch pad to get you to the it blows my mind, and I say it, and I don't say it to be disparaging, but when somebody says something, when you see these comments come across, like somebody put a comment in Facebook yesterday or today saying, "Oh, CoCo Fest, that's a word I haven't heard of in a while." I don't know if you guys saw that one or not. And I'm thinking, well, I've only known about CoCo Fest for 2 years, but it's been going on for 26. So where have you been? But I say things like that not to be mean spirited, but yeah, it's amazing how much how people come in all the time with different perspectives. And when I came into this 2 years ago, I didn't know anything. And so I've just been on this voyage of discovery. And I'm trying to kind of capture what I learned along the way to share with everybody. What do we have here? Paco says, also for starting off setting up DriveWire 4 server on a Raspberry Pi. Yeah, there's a lot of things we can talk about. I definitely think we should do one on DriveWire in the future because I need to learn that. I think doing hardware, that was really good how David put his camera down and showed the hardware thing. We could try to do something like that where we can have a close-up of a hardware project. Interviews.
Doing the simpler upgrades like you were mentioning earlier, like how to put an extended basic ROM in. Yeah.
Do an interview on things, talk about project updates as people are doing their blogs. If they want to give us an audible update on what they're blogging about and what they're working on, be happy to hear that kind of stuff. And then whatever the people watching want to talk about or hear about, we're down for that. Evan Wright says, yes, DriveWire. I know nothing about that. All right, so you and I are on the same page, Evan. So that's
or
cool.
Nitrous 09.
Nitrous 09. Well, I know that Nitrous 9 is a little bit better than Nitrous 8, right?
Oh, way better.
Way
Whole version better.
It's a whole version better, right? So, DriveWire. Yeah, that was one of the topics that we came up with was on the list was to talk about OS 9 in general, to demystify OS 9. Do we need to do like an OS 9 Unraveled series? So
I think Nick would just burn the book, so probably.
Yeah, right. So, what might help, at least for me too, is that again getting back to this Raspberry Pi thing. Ron Klein has put together bootable OS 9 things from the menu, so you can launch straight into OS 9 from this Raspberry Pi thing and try it out. Hugo says, I have both DriveWire and the CoCo SDC, and I find myself simply using the SD card to copy stuff and use it on the CoCo 3. Glenn Hewlett says, I'm with Evan. I've been ignoring it, but I would like to know more about it. I think he's talking about DriveWire. Yes. And then Evan Wright says, yes, 09 as well. So, yeah, it looks like there's a thirst for more discussions to go on there. So that's good. An appetite for knowledge.
3 more shows. You have topics for.
We got more topics.
Or
so
Stevie
what else?
could go through the whole OS 9 manual.
Yeah, there you go.
Paragraph 1.
Yeah. If I remember correctly, that was a very thick book. From
1,200 pages, somewhere around there, I think. Yeah. That wasn't just OS 9. That was the basic 09 and the technical reference and the windowing stuff. Like there was chunks, so a bit more digestible if you just concentrate on the part you wanted to learn.
I want to see Steve do an OS 9 tutorial.
I got to learn it.
I want to see Nick co-host it, actually.
Good luck on that.
So should we do it as Arnold Schwarzenegger? This is Arnold Schwarzenegger, and I want to talk to you about Nitrous 9. It's got so much power. You can multitask. Get down.
And Nick will guest host as the Australian accented Pee Wee Herman.
Oh, jeez.
I like when he did it.
Killer today, Curtis.
I like
Clint Eastwood coming?
Clint Eastwood. Yes, what you have to ask yourself is, do you feel lucky?
You really want to try typing DOS, punk?
Yeah.
Do you?
Do you? We got bad impressions for days.
Nothing but serious talks here, folks.
Hey,
We lost serious a long time ago.
So what was that, Mark?
they get what they pay for.
You get what you pay for, right? Yeah.
Actually, given what they pay for it here, I feel overpaid.
Tens of 20s of cents. So we got lots to talk about. Anything else we want to talk about while we're still together? Any questions from the people watching or anything else that you guys are here now? Hugo, are you in the call? I see your face, but I haven't heard you speak.
Can you hear me?
I hear you, yes.
Yep.
Okay. Bonjour.
Okay, bonjour. I was just listening, you know.
Okay. I just want to make sure you were there.
Very interesting. I was wondering... that was not me, by the way. Using DriveWire, is there much more things that you can do with DriveWire that you couldn't do by just flipping back and forth SD card with the SDC? I was just wondering.
It's DriveWire is a whole
There is
protocol, so
one.
that adds stuff like accessing the internet, like
Okay.
accessing printers from your PC, where you can print from the CoCo to a printer, etc. Like that kind of stuff you can do under DriveWire.
Okay, nice. I guess, well, I guess I should have read some documentation before asking questions, but I'm pretty sure
Never does, don't worry about
most people don't have any idea how powerful it can be then.
Yeah.
Just not for accessing files.
No, Bill
So-
Pierce, for example, on his M shell, he uses DriveWire so you can actually get auto software updates right into your Nitrous 9 boot directly from the CoCo itself. You don't have to copy anything; it just goes right through your PC through DriveWire onto the internet.
I'm
As
not,
Actually,
I'm not a very
now
big
that you point-
user. I'm not a very big user of OS 9. It's mostly
Hey,
to play
you're my friend.
Laser Shoot Larry or King's Quest mostly.
Yeah, right.
I boot in OS 9, and that's about it. I like command line interfaces. I just don't have any need for it right now.
Yeah, unless you wanted to like do a printout of say one of your listings for that game project you're working on, you want to actually put it on a printer on your PC, and so it's easier to look at chunks of code, at different times. Something like that you might.
So let me ask
Yeah.
you this: you just got me thinking about something. What if your PC driver is something like Adobe Acrobat, and you want to get a digital copy of a listing? Could you do that as well, like print to a PDF printer?
I've never tried, but I don't see why not.
That would be interesting. That'd be kind of cool to do, like an L list, and then print out your basic code to ends up being captured as a PDF file that you can then,
Hey.
OCR and everything else.
Right. One more idea. Would it be possible to have like a tiny little resident program that you could access from BASIC, for example, with using a key that's never used, like F1 or something, to send your CoCo, your BASIC listing to your PC, or import directly a BASIC listing from the PC? That would be pretty nice. Because I keep... Yeah, sorry.
I don't think it has that built in right now, unless somebody can correct me. But there's no reason it couldn't.
Mm-hmm.
Are there such things like as terminate and stay resident programs that can run in a CoCo?
Oh yeah, you just have to hijack the keyboard interrupt and be nice with the.
Be nice with it, huh?
Be nice with it.
Be nice with BASIC.
Yes.
Okay.
No, a lot of people
as
did
far as-
extensions to BASIC for that same reason and using the same techniques. But people have made full line screen editors and stuff that are callable from BASIC. So that's been done a lot over the years. So there's no reason. Yeah, you could do that with the DriveWire driver too.
I wrote some bits of code that actually can cohabit with BASIC and that won't break everything. Because of course if you run a program if you run a CoCo tree and you run a CoCo tree program, most of the programs will try to use almost every single memory space or interrupts of fast interrupts and everything that's available. But if you're running CoCo 2 programs on a CoCo tree, it leaves you lots of flexibility to have resident programs. Now, I don't know what are the options. I mean, what would you want to do? But I guess there are some possibilities. By the way, I was looking at software solutions to have to emulate the artifacting using software. I guess that would be a totally crazy project.
Oh wow!
I'm trying to remember. Nick Sock was talking about doing that at one time. Do you know if you ever finished that?
I think I would require a 6309 because there wouldn't be enough power, processing power in the 6809. Basically, that would require me to run some kind of a fast interrupt to copy bunches of pixels from the CoCo 2 video mode, the P mode 4, to one of the CoCo 3 modes that is 4 colors and has the same resolution. That's feasible. That would probably induce some lag, but I guess it would require slightly faster processor to do that.
Yeah, 6 on a native mode, maybe.
Yes, that's a possibility, and that's quite interesting. I mean, it would be a very nice trick, really, being able to do that. I was also thinking about doing that for semi-graphics, but that would be very complex, and you can't read. You can't really know where the graphics, the graphic pages are located for the CoCo 2 modes. The port where you set the value is write only. I think it's the PR or something. So anyway, we're getting very technical there.
That's okay.
Yeah.
So
Wait, it's not a fixed topic. We don't have to stick with this just being
Yes.
the questions for
Yeah, we're allowed
beginners
to
thing.
bounce back and forth.
anyway, I'll leave the conversation go.
Yeah, well, it might be nice to get some updates from you, Hugo, as well, on a future talk if you want to share some information about your projects you're working on right now as well, you know?
I'm refactoring. It's very, as I wrote, it rhymes with boring. Basically, I removed all the test and all the test elements, everything that I wrote to have one level running. I remove everything from the main program, so that I can now build the code to have multiple levels. So I have to factor lots of things, because I'm a guy who plans a lot when I program, but that part I just wanted to get some results quickly.
Sure.
And now
sure.
I have to pay the price because I built over a very bad, very limited foundation. I guess other people who wrote games run into that kind of trouble as well. You want to show results and have people say, wow, in the short term it's good for it gives a boost to your motivation, but now I have to remove everything and from the core code and start over with different sequencing of the events. But I guess I'll have something in a few days or weeks if I get the time.
Okay.
So
does that draw from your motivation? Does it now become like a more of a labor of labor instead of a labor of love, when you're like, oh crap, now I got to go back to the drawing board and do everything else? Does that like make you draw it out longer?
This it can be hard on the motivation, and you keep trying to run your code, it doesn't even compiles, or it crashes all the time. And I think that the smart thing to do was to remove all the object creation code and start with the plain game core code, the engine itself, bare bones, and re-inject things inside it one at a time, instead of trying to save everything. You can't save everything. Some of it's really bad code. So you have to be humble at that point. But what looked like a mountain looks more manageable right now because I removed everything. I can go a little bit of it at a time, but I don't have the motivation of being able to play with it.
Yeah.
Now
I was just
there's
wondering.
nothing to play with. That's why it takes a while, and I don't give any update right now. But in a short while, I'll be able to show probably level transitions. One of my short-term goals. And you have to set your goals. This has to motivate you in a way, like showing results or having other people try your code. That's a great source of motivation. Well, unless they say your game is crappy, but it never happened to me because I'm so talentful.
And modest too, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm the best in modesty. So, by the way, today is croissant day in Montreal. I'm in my office, and it sucks. So anyway, I'll let the other people talk a bit. So very nice to be with you all.
Yeah,
guys.
yeah, it's nice to have you. And
Thanks for stopping by.
from what we've all seen, that project looks absolutely amazing. It looks like a 16-bit platformer from what you're putting up there right now. It looks really good. So
On VGA.
You know, another thing that's really motivating is seeing other people, jumping into very ambitious projects. Not trying to redo what's been already done, or when I look at Nick's new project, it's also a source of motivation. I know it's gonna look great. The guy has lots of experience. He has nothing more to prove, but at the same time, with the tools we have today, I know this will be an incredible space shooter, and I can't wait to see the first few animations or the first graphics. And with the high color menu that there might be in this game, this will look fantastic. And I don't know if Nick is still on the call.
Yes,
I guess it's very late in Australia, I guess.
Early, actually.
Oh,
it's like,
early.
It's like 4 or 5. It's like 5 a.m. 5 or 6 a.m.
in the morning.
6 a.m.
The day's only starting.
I'm literally on the opposite side of the planet, literally. So, Nick, do you think you'll have something to show in a few days, or?
I have things to show even now, but I'd rather I sort of stage the work out. In other words, I have a plan. I'm going to do, say, sound, and I do it completely, and then I announce it. I don't sort of show bit by bit. Curtis knows, because he gets a sort of behind the scenes look at a lot of my work. But
lucky guy, I guess.
So I do actually have some things, some of the base routines up and running, and I'm adding to it at the moment. So when I do the next chapter on my blog, I can talk all about it then, rather than just, today I did this, tomorrow I did that. It gets a bit monotonous if you just keep hearing that. Whereas, it sounds more impressive if you just tell everyone, I've done all the graphics. Bang, this is what it looks like.
Just a question. On the CoCo tree, you can have a line by line vertical scrolling, right? You can be that precise.
Yes.
Good. That's very nice. That's on other platforms such as the Commodore 64, people don't realize there's lots of scrollers, but the programming behind it is totally insane. It's very ugly. On the CoCo, you can actually program it in a very neat way. The code will look good. It doesn't resort to any bizarre tricks. There's the hardware to help you. But you mentioned you wanted to have some kind of a control panel on screen.
Well, having said that, the CoCo has all these nice hardware. The method I'm actually employing in my current game doesn't use any of those hardware tricks at all. I've actually got a completely different way to do it, which I'll explain in the next chapter. And I do that for a very good reason. Mainly because when you use the hardware, you are restricted to what the hardware can do. So if you have a certain way you want to do things, or a certain need, well, the hardware doesn't let you do it. You have to do it the way the hardware dictates. So the method I'm doing is a different approach, whereby I have the control, so I get to do things the way I want it to work.
That's quite interesting. And if we look at the 8-bit platforms out there, I guess the hardware put some very severe limitations on what you can and cannot do. But at the same time, having a good processor, I guess it allows you to circumvent some of these limitations. But someone posted recently a little video or a link to some guy who ported, was it Rescue on Fractalis? Was ported on the PC. And I thought, what's the point? I mean, this game existed in this state with this kind of story because that's the limit of what we were able to do at the time. Today, it's a bit irrelevant on the PC or on any very powerful computer. So anyway, I'm digressing a little bit.
It's okay.
But yeah, we'll all be waiting for your next blog entry because your single entry looks very lonely up there.
Yes. Well, I'm hoping it'll be a monthly thing. So,
well,
Yeah.
when you were programming Popstar Pilot, I think there was a very long lull at some point where you almost abandoned the project.
yes,
Am I right?
yes, it was, yes. And you raised the issue just before about the motivation, and that is very relevant for a lot of programming. You've got the programmer has to be motivated to do it because it is a lot of work. And there was a bit of a lull there in the middle of Popstar Pilot where the motivation had been lost, and I started doing a few other projects. But then I brought myself round, got myself re-motivated, and I continued and decided I'm going to finish this no matter what, and I have.
So the history was made.
Yeah, the motivation is a very important factor. So.
Yeah, and I can relate in a sense too, because even just working on my video series of going through the book in BASIC, it's like I don't even have to write a game right now. I just have to read a chapter and do a video. And even that, I found sometimes it's hard to be motivated because it's not necessarily fun. You know, it's not necessarily easy. It's not necessarily fun. So sometimes you have to kind of push yourself through there. What I find too, and I'm going to have to wrap this up pretty soon too. I got people poking their head in my door here. What I find sometimes too is when I go to do a project, and even if it's not a programming project, but if I'm going to design a flyer or a spreadsheet or anything, my biggest problem is I have this big vision in my head on what the perfect utopian holy grail final product should be. And I want the 1.0 draft to be that. I have a hard time starting from humble beginnings and working my way to a final product. I just want everything to be perfect from the beginning. And when it's not, I get frustrated and I lose interest and I can't force myself to want to keep doing things. And I have that problem making videos for YouTube. I have that problem doing a series and things. And sometimes I lose interest or I lose motivation. And so I'm just curious, when you guys are working on these big projects, what do you do to hold on to it or to get it back? Because it is a labor of love to continue to kind of power through some of these things.
Well, it's no doubt that putting the games together is a lot of work. What I tend to do is I break the whole project down to smaller stages, and I sort of concentrate on that segment only. I finish that segment, then I move on to the next segment. And bit by bit, it builds up. It also helps when you take all the different challenges that are needed in the game. Like with Popstar Pilot, the big challenge in that was trying to achieve a split-screen hardware 1-byte scroll. That's what I wanted the game to do. That was a pretty challenging part, and that's what motivated me, trying to make that work. So that kept me going, as well as a few other features in the game as well. Getting them to work was what motivated me. Once I had achieved those goals, well, the rest was just work. I actually had to write the game then. So hence why halfway through I sort of lost motivation. I did all the challenging bits, and then I thought, well, what's the motivation now? The game, I know I can write the game now, but that's not motivating enough. I think a lot of the motivation also comes from having people showing an interest in your work. there's not much point spending all that time when there's no one interested. So, you tend to lose motivation. But when people show an interest, if you put a part of your program up on the Facebook page or whatever, and then people comment and say, oh, that looks really good, or even those that say, oh, that'd be good if you added this or changed that, that feedback from the community is also what gives you motivation, and that becomes a challenge to satisfy that motivation that others have. So yeah, that's what drives it, I guess. That's why I do the blog page. That's why I announce on the Facebook page what my current progress is, because I'm looking for feedback. It's the feedback that drives the motivation.
But the community has evolved a lot over the last 5 years. From what I can see, we're more connected. We have these chats. The Facebook page is very active. I think the amount of interest that you generated with your project, I guess it was a surprise at some point. You didn't expect that when you started, right?
No, I didn't. When I started it, of course, it was a challenge. And then when I completed the challenges, well, then I said I lost motivation. Well, that's because I didn't expect there to be that many people actually interested in the final product. And anyway, I kept on going and decided to finish it. And in the end, when I did put it up for sale, I thought I'd sell only at the most 20 copies. And I sold 80. So that goes to show there are a lot of people who are interested. And I'm now more motivated to do my new game than what I was when I started Popstar Pilot, because I know that there are people who are interested. And as you say, it's in the last 5 years, the CoCo community has really come a long way. For me anyway, here in Australia, the CoCo community is more active now than what it used to be back in the 80s when, well, in Australia, we were far away from the US market anyway, so it was a little bit quiet. But now with the help of the internet and Facebook and everything, and these chats and the videos that Steve's doing, it's just made the whole thing bigger and more accessible. And now it gives me more of a purpose to try and do these projects.
That's great.
That's good. Well,
Steve, are we are we running very late for you?
Well, what I wanted to do when we speak about the community and speak about the projects, I think this is a great segue right now to bring up the CoCo map.
Yeah, because I was happy you took over.
Because here it is.
About motivation, I have lost my motivations on the way. I could still manage the map, but I mean, I entered more than 200 of these dots.
You did.
I'm happy you entered the 15 next.
Yeah. So, and I have more to do. I have more people to respond to. But so this is
up. It's piling up, and at some point they're gonna get like a bit impatient.
I think the backlog right now is only 2 or 3 people. I'll get to them today. So, this is
what happened? What happened in that?
So this is a map that Hugo started, and he shared it with us on Facebook, and I think it also got shared out on the mailing list. And earlier this week, there was about 215 people on here. Now there's like over 250, right? So, and this is people around the world who own color computers who have at least told us where they live. We're not asking you for your home address, just like your, city, state, and zip code. And and you can see we have a very good concentration in North America. We've got a pretty good representation down here in South America, even in Mexico. Alex was here earlier, and Alex was the guy I added from Mexico. So we have Colombia. Here's Mexico over here. So South America is looking pretty good. We've got a nice European collection here. We have Austria even, which is kind of new. Switzerland is here representing, right? What is wrong with Francais right now? Why is there no Viva la Francais here?
the French were very fond of other 8-bit computers. I can't remember which ones, but some of the 8-bit platforms were extremely popular there, to the point that there was no market for other computers such as the CoCo. I could do some research. I have a few friends in France, and I could ask them actually. But that's an interesting, observation. And by the way, if people want to organize an event, they can actually see where's the
Yeah, we have like VCF.
a nice spot to organize it. For example, if you organize something in Brussels, you're going to have people coming from Denmark and the UK without any trouble. I mean, the distances are quite short. Now, in North America, you would organize something in Columbus, for example. You'd get all of the Northeast and maybe even Stevie if you want to hit the road.
That's been my dream, to be a traveling. I want to hit every retro show there is around the world, at some point in time. So I need to get a few more, couple 100 million subscribers on my YouTube channel to help fund this.
My next challenge is to drive to Ohio.
For the Tandy assembly.
Yeah.
So so this map is neat. So you can this map. There's a link to this map on my YouTube, Facebook, my website, whatever. Yeah, it's on my website, imacoconut.com. And you can email me or Hugo or leave a comment on the mailing list, and we'll try to get you in there. So let me go back to some of the comments in chat, because we have gotten through. I've missed a few of them. So when we were talking about motivation. Evan Wright's the one who brought up the map too earlier. So when we were talking about motivation, Evan Wright says the key to happiness is setting the bar low. And then Evan says decomposing helps break the problem into several test programs to tackle each issue separately. That sounds good. Evan Wright says, Newfoundland, there are CoCo users in Newfoundland? Yeah. Actually, when you talk about France, though, too, I have that commercial for CoCoDo from France. And there was also the kind of a red version of the MC10 that was called the Alice. Wasn't that a French machine as well?
I have no idea. By the way, are you sure it's not a French-Canadian?
That could be.
French-Canadian.
That's French-Canadian. Not French-Canadian,
by the way,
French.
we couldn't understand anything in the little jingle song they sing in that. It was quite amazing. They managed to sell at one computer with that.
I understood CoCo and Do.
The publicity was very lame.
Okay, but yeah, I remember seeing the red version of the MC10 that was called the Alice, and I thought that was French, of French origin for the Alice computer. I'll have to look into that. Very cool. So Paul, I'll get you added. Paul, send me just email me your information again, because I might forget. So Paul Fiscarelli, who's with us right now, FiceGap. He's the guy who also responded to one of my basic programming things, where I created a demo, and I said, I'd like to see somebody else send me their version of this demo. So he sent me a virtual floppy disk by email, and so I've gotten a few kind of community contributions to my programming series now too, and I think he just sent me a new one too on Ghostbusters, because John Mark Mobley sent me the Ghostbusters demo that Bob Swagger had converted from a PDF document to an OCR to whatever and stuff like that. So it was a cool little story and how that got translated back to the CoCo, talking about modern technology. And so, yeah, it's kind of cool. When I started doing this programming and basic thing a year and a half ago, I was doing it for me. I was doing it as a tutorial for somebody who's maybe never done it before. And I thought at the time, maybe some kids might want to watch this. And maybe I'll inspire some kids like I was inspired. And it turns out I'm getting more responses from adults, which is fine. Whoever wants to watch it, it's fine. And now I'm getting programming samples sent to me too, which is great. And then because we can do it on an emulator now, you know, if somebody wants to email me a disk image, it's kind of cool to have other people show me what they're doing and for me to show that off to everybody else as well. Like, look what you can do too, you know. It's just, it's pretty cool. It's been a fun little journey that I'm there. And so another reason why I was asking about motivation is that, like, right now, before I record a new chapter, I have in my mind how I want to make these CoCo fonts. And so I want to do this little project where I can do all the fonts. But again, now we're getting into the work. I have to sit here and plot them all out onto graph paper, or I was going to do a spreadsheet and plot them all out, and then I have to convert that into draw statements. But it's like a little mini project to make this little routine that I'm going to use. And so it's like I haven't stopped thinking about it, but I haven't actually started doing it. And so now that is slowing down the progress on me continuing my project on making more programming videos. So I just don't know if this is something that other people who program run into as well. Is this getting stuck in your own headspace sometimes, or?
Yes.
No, that does happen, yes. And then there's other things too, like real life starts interfering too.
Yeah.
Where you go off your project for a month or two, like I just did with mine, you know, being busy with work, and now it's like I finally got some time off. I can get back to the project, but I also finally got some time off, so I'd like to just rest and like veg out watching TV or something. So
Yeah.
sometimes that
Yeah.
that kick to get you back in is hard.
Yeah.
And
It's
when
like I
you
told.
when you spend your day working on a computer, maybe you don't want to spend your weekend programming a game.
Yeah. What I actually did is I took my whole little setup. My whole setup is in VCC, and it's a very small folder. I've stuck that in my Google Drive now, so it synchronizes, and I can run it in my laptop. So like sometimes, because I teach at night, if I get in early, I can just open up my laptop and maybe work on things too, and do some prep work and everything. So I've kind of cloud synchronized my whole little programming project now, so it makes it a little bit easier for me to do from anywhere. And I'm even open to sharing that Google Drive with anybody else who wants to collaborate and send me. And so instead of even having to email me a disk image, if you just want to drop it in the Google Drive and we can work on projects together, we can do stuff like that too.
Nice. Oh, Steve, you know, we asked a question. We asked a question earlier about what happened in France. Well, I have found some very interesting information. There was a series of computers built by Thomson from 1982 to 1986 or 7, 89 actually. And these series of computers were using guess which processor was used.
The 6309. No, the
6809.
Okay, 6809.
So they have this series of computers which were very, very popular, and the graphics levels are a bit similar to the CoCo 3.
Okay.
So maybe it would be a good idea to try to reach out to other communities around the Thomson series in France, or the FM7 in Japan, trying to see, we're all brothers. We are in the 6809 Brotherhood or something. Trying to see, is there a community? Is this alive and kicking?
What was it? What was the Japanese one?
FM7.
FM7.
Yeah,
Fujitsu's
so the Thomson M series in France, and the FM7 in Japan, for example, which are seem to be very good computers based on the 6809.
Somebody asked recently about the FM7 on Facebook. I think it was. I guess the processors, the graphics are actually exchanged through some sort of information tunnel.
Yeah, well, the concept of graphics aperture, which was used also on the VGA card on the PC. You have a little window in RAM used for communicating with the video card to transfer pixels, and this little window is actually smaller than the screen. So you have to move this window, and it makes the performance well, it has an impact on performance because you can't write over the whole video screen. You can write a diagonal line in one shot. You have to plan it in advance. So I had this problem when I was programming on the PC, trying to do some super VGA graphics. There was the same concept of aperture. It was a pain in the ass. Also, the FM7 could display 8 colors. So the resolution was as good as a CoCo tree, but you had a fixed palette of 8 colors. So there was a severe trade-off there. I guess you couldn't design all the fancy, colorful games that you could on a CoCo. So really, the computer is much faster because it's dual processor, but it's more primitive than the CoCo tree. It was launched earlier in time, at a time where the concepts of palette were seldom used on personal computers, and 8 colors looked like it was like super cool at the time.
Yeah.
But, in 1986 or 7, it was already a bit dated. So I don't know how much we should be amazed at the FM7. I'm still trying to find some demonstrations online, an emulator, or at least a video showing what it was able to do. And
there are some videos on YouTube for the FM7.
Are there games running on this computer, or only static images?
There were some games. I remember seeing a few on YouTube. I don't know if they're still there or not. I'll see if I can find them.
That would be nice to compare, and I'll try to find some demonstrations of the Thomson series. I knew about this computer, the French one. I knew about this computer, but I never realized it was based on the Motorola processor. I guess it makes it much more interesting for us.
Yeah, definitely.
Have you got a link to a website?
There's some entries
so far, I'm on Wikipedia. I haven't tried to find anything yet. At least if the software is in French, I'll be able to do some kind of presentation for you guys.
If anybody out, I just want to throw out a quick shameful plug, and I'm going to have to wrap up here in a few minutes too. But if anybody's watching right now on the live stream and you have not subscribed to my channel, I'm at 1,599 subscribers. I'm one subscriber away from 1,600 subscribers. So somebody help bring me over the limit and bring me to 16K like my original CoCo. That's cool. Yeah, lots of cool links out there. This is and the great news is that we've been talking for almost 3 hours and we haven't run out of things to talk about. So I think CoCoTALK has got more life in it still to come.
Steve, look at your count now.
Look at my count now. Okay. Did you just unsubscribe from me to screw with me, Hugo?
Just subscribe back now.
Okay. So okay, now I'm at 1601. Okay.
Wait, when we drop that a bit more, I can do that.
All right, I just reached 16K on this broadcast. So boom, we are there. History has been made. 16K. Now I need to go to 64K is the next one, right? I'm going to jump right over 32. So that's cool. All right, guys. Well, let's go ahead and wrap up this talk. Let's save some more talk for next week. This was definitely a lot of fun. And I think I've mentioned this before, and I think so far people are saying they're interested in this. I'm open to also having another live talk that's not necessarily about the CoCo, that's just more generic, where we can talk about gaming and computers and technology and just more possibly modern general interest things. And so if there is an appetite for other live talk shows and discussion shows, it's turning out to be, I think, fun for everybody involved. I think the people up here talking are enjoying talking. I think the people watching are enjoying listening. So there might be room for more talks on a wider range of topics. So if that is of interest as well, for those of you watching and those of you participating, leave us some comments as well. Glenn Hewlett says, I always enjoy these CoCo Talks. We enjoy having you, Glenn, and we enjoy what you've been working on with Pac-Man and everything else. So we're looking forward to more stuff. Cool. Well, on behalf of Hugo and Mark and David and Grant and Nick and Curtis and Bill and Bruce and myself, I want to thank everybody for being here. James Ross just comes in, says, I've been lurking for like the past 45 minutes. Good talk. Thank you, James Ross, for being here. Always a pleasure to have you. And leave us some suggestions and recommendations on what to talk about next week. And we'll be back and we'll do it again. All right, guys. Thank you so much. CoCo forever and all that good stuff. Okay. Thanks, guys. Take care, everybody.
All right. Bye.
Later all.
Bye-bye.
You bet.
Goodbye.